Boing, everybody's here. I know, y'all are getting like not the best angle or anything here. Yeah, hello everybody. I don't know what happened. I normally use Streamlabs via my phone and it's never had a problem until today when I opened it up. I knew something was wrong because the chat wasn't appearing and it just is not connecting with my YouTube and it's very weird. Come here, Peg. Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of bonked you there. There you go. Thank you. Yes. So, hi. Hello, everyone. Yeah. Hi. Hello. Yes, Peg is here. Yes, let's do the house rules because we'll dive right in because we are running a bit behind because I don't even know, guys. I don't even know. I don't even know. I don't even know, Peg. It's very weird. I'm only saying because you can't properly see the incredible blanket that I have here. Courtesy of Clover, that is a blown up picture of Peg mid yawn. Okay. Yes. Hi, Peg. Hi. Okay. You can. Maybe you'll just see her ears. Yeah. So house rules are in the chat. Thank you, Game Wizard, for putting those there. I was looking for something. What was I looking for? I think my tablet. Where did I put my tablet? It's a valid question, Peg. Where did I put my iPad? I had it a second ago. I swear I had it in my hand. What did I do with it? My notes are on there. Peg, what did I do with my iPad? Oh, I put my book atop it and it opened and was perfectly literally perfectly opened across it because I need to get more printer paper before I print my notes again. Get me to my notes. On book 7, Ajax Duels with Hector. Wee. No chat on screen. For some, yeah, the chat is not showing on screen, is it? Can I adjust the? It does say live chat replay. But yeah, no, unfortunately, I don't think the chat's going to show on screen this time. So sorry, guys, until I figure out what the fuck is going on with my Streamlabs. I don't know. I tried disconnecting it and reconnecting it, all that. Did I jinx us? No, I think there was software updates that are just causing problems overall. So, but yeah, so normally I use my phone to stream. Not that anyone is shocked because I am not a professional. Tech issues are a thing that happen. They happened a lot more in Odyssey Book Club as I was getting my footing, so it's kind of an ongoing joke that there's going to be tech issues. So, okay. So, here is the Earth. Damn, what a sweet Earth, you might say. I am a millennial. Book 7, Ajax Duels with Hector. We had our lovely moment of, Hector and Andromache and all of them mingling inside of Troy itself. Given the last minute adjustments, oh wait, I'd already read that. Derp. And yes, welcome anybody who's new. If you can scroll up in the chat, you'll see we have a couple house rules, so we can keep this running as smoothly as possible because there's a lot of stuff we dive into on ILIAD. It's a very dense work. So yes, we're gonna have Paris decided to. I can't really say he decided to get his ass in gear. It's more like Hector berated him into getting his ass in gear, and he's actually going to go fight now outside the walls of Troy with Hector. And so we're going back out into the fray. Diomedes has had his Aristeia. He's come back down from his Aristeia. He traded some armor with Glaukos, which I did read some cool papers that make that moment even more nerdy. But we didn't have time to go through that in the stream, and maybe I'll update some of the notes for that on Patreon, but we'll see. We're just going to go right into book 7. My man's Telamonian Ajax is going to finally really enter the chat. He's been here, he's been mentioned. We haven't gotten to see him kind of flex any sauce yet, but the man is finally entering. So we'll just get into. Oh, excuse you, Peg. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And you will see Peg around as she is wont to do. Put me in, coach! I mean, he's been there, he's been fighting, but now we get a potential for a duel, which is always fun. So we'll just get on with it. Book 7, Ajax duels Hector. Vaunting, a flash in arms, Hector swept through the gates, with his brother Paris keeping pace behind him. Both men, bent on combat, on they fought like wind, when a god sends down some welcome blast to sailors. Desperate for it, worked to death at the polished oars, beating the heavy seas, their arms slack with the labor. So welcome that brace of men appeared to the Trojans, desperate for their captains. Each one killed his man. Paris took Menesthius, who had once lived in Arni, a son of King Araitos, lord of the war club, and his lady Philomedusa with large, lovely eyes. Hector slashed Ioneus's throat with a sharp spear, ripped him from under the helmet's hammered bronze rim. His legs collapsed in death. Quick in the jolting onset, Lycia's captain, Glaucus, son of Hippolochus, skewered Dexius' son, Iphinios, just as he leapt behind his fast mares. He stabbed his shoulder hard, and down from his car, Iphinios crashed to earth, and his limbs went slack with death. Rampaging Trojans. Yes. But as soon as fiery-eyed Athena marked them, killing Argive ranks in this all-out assault, down she rushed from the peaks of Mount Olympus, straight for sacred Troy. But Phoebus Apollo, spotting her from the Pergamus heights, the god grim-set on victory for the Trojans, rose to intercept her. As the two came face to face beside the great oak, Lord Apollo, the son of Zeus, led off. What next? What is the mighty Zeus's daughter blazing after now? Down from Olympus, what heroics stir your heart? No doubt you'll hand your Argives victory soon. You'll turn the tide of battle. You have no mercy, none for the dying Trojans. Come, listen to me. My plan is so much better. Let us halt the war and the heat of combat now, at least for today. They'll fight again tomorrow, until they win their way to the fixed doom of Troy, since that is your only passion, you two goddesses, to plunder Troy to rubble. Athena's eyes lit up, and the goddess said, So be it, Archer of the sky. Those were my very thoughts, winging down from Olympus into the midst of Trojans and Achaeans. But tell me, how do you hope to stop the men from fighting? Hector, Lord Apollo, the son of Zeus, replied. We'll spur his nerve and strength, that breaker of horses. See if he'll challenge one of the Argives man to man, and they will duel in bloody combat to the death. Achaeans armed in bronze will thrill to his call. They'll put up a man to battle shining Hector. So Apollo staged the action. Her eyes afire, the goddess Pallas did not resist a moment. She flashed the word in Helenus' mantic spirit. The son of Priam sensed what pleased the immortals, hatching instant plans, and coming up to Hector, advised him quickly. Okay, so Athena and Apollo, as we know, on different sides. Apollo on the side of the Trojans, Athena staunchly on the side of the Achaeans. And Apollo proposes this idea of basically halftime break. Basically, let's stop for the day. We've fought all day. Let's pause for the day. And Athena's like, I guess the mortals could use a break. Everybody, we're watching the battle shift sides. It's constantly like, okay, well, now the Achaeans are in front. Okay, well, now the Trojans are doing better. Okay, well, now the Achaeans are doing better. So everything, and this is pretty much how the war has gone for 9 years. They've been battling like this and just getting nowhere. I mean, I make the World War I comparison because it's like they're constantly fighting for maybe like inches, but the big thing is if you want to get to the enemy trench for the Greeks, you need to break the walls of Troy, which they haven't done. If you're the Trojans, to get to the enemy trench, it's to basically breach the area where all the ships are and set them all alight, or kill all the Greeks somehow such that they leave. They haven't yet been able to do that. Yeah, stagnation, wartime edition. Yeah, I mean, and it's an attritional siege war. Nobody's really going anywhere, and nobody's making any kind of progress because there's no small progress you can really make. It's either you make the big push happen and it succeeds, or it fails. Yeah, no wonder everyone's so annoyed. This is why everybody's on edge, why Agamemnon's having a neurotic break from reality, why everybody's tempers are really high, in addition to everything else. But this, as we can understand, is why the psychology of the heroes makes so much sense. But I think it's really interesting here in that it's like, okay, we'll do this. What it says Athena does here is she flashed the word in Helenus' mantic spirit. Now, Helenus, we know, is son of Priam, who also has powers of foresight, of prophecy. In fact, he is the one who prophesied that Paris was going to be the doom of Troy. And so what's interesting is this whole idea of like, I have an idea, I'll send something like an idea then to a human. It's kind of similar to how Zeus because Thetis pulled her big divine IOU, needed to get the Greeks to do something. So he sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon that will spur him into action. In this way, Athena really, kind of proving she's her father's daughter, goes, okay, well, I'll send a word to the prophet, who will then say, oh, I have an idea, let's do a duel. Now, the duel ultimately, I don't think either of the, because, this is going to be dueling Hector and Apollo is on Team Troy and he does not want Hector to die yet, we can assume that, like, the duel, if it happens, is going to be very short-lived and it's going to be, once again, kind of a stalemate. We're still very much in stalemate mode. But it's deceptive in the idea of like, well, at least maybe someone will kill the other and we'll be good, when it's like, no, really, this is sort of yet another hurry up and wait situation that's being created for a lot of these characters. And again, Apollo is doing this to forestall the doom of Troy because he knows it's coming. As he says, he goes, look, Troy's doomed, I know it, but I would love to basically push it off as long as possible. Meanwhile, Athena's just sort of tired of this whole thing, but she's also recognizing the Trojans are pushing an advantage right now. So if she can halt that, that leaves her Greeks there to fight another day. So there's like, the gods really are playing war game. And I don't mean to make it sound flippant, but they're understanding the strategy of what's happening. And yeah, extending the reality TV, but also like there's a strategy to all of this. Now, of course, above all of that is the will of Zeus, which we know trumps all of that, and fate even sort of higher, because the will of Zeus almost exists like its own thing. Again, we talked about this in the introductory session. But I do think it's interesting that, like, both Athena and Zeus have now momentarily aided in kind of prolonging this conflict by playing upon, ultimately, this deeply rooted and in many ways probably suppressed anxious desire that all of these fighters have to just have the war be over. Like, ultimately, even if they don't want to admit it, they want the war to be done. They want, especially the Greeks, they want to go home. They're fucking tired of this shit. So they're playing upon this deep-rooted anxiety by seeming to offer potential solutions that'll get everything done right now, or at least give, in this case, sort of give them a break. Yeah, God's playing Risk or Axis and allies at Troy. Kinda, but, and as much as they don't see it as so great a thing as it is to the humans, because again, the gods don't die, they are very personally invested in their own reputations and how they feel about it. So like Athena and Hera obviously felt slighted by Paris and are angry at the Trojans. So they're just like, well, the Greeks want to fight them, we're down. We will help them. And there is an element of the gods wanting it done on their terms rather than the mortals' terms. But I mean, there's also Zeus tried to do the thing with the dream that nearly backfired in everyone's face, because Agamemnon sort of scripted, oh, we're going to lose halftime speech, made everyone try and dip. And even Zeus, standing up there on Olympus probably going, wait, that's not what was supposed to happen. And it took Athena going down to Odysseus going, get it together, man, get it together. So it is kind of funny at times how they do these things, and it doesn't always work because humans are weird, but most of the time it's like we're very aware of human nature and we know how they're going to act. So what if we propose this? I give a bet they'll do the thing. But yeah, again, what they're ultimately playing into are these deep-rooted anxieties that the humans have, that the warriors and all of them have, for the war to just be over. I mean, again, it's been 9 years at this point. They're all tired. So that's what they're ultimately working with and trying to play upon. And also, yes, the heroic ethos of, wanting Kleos and doing all these things. So they play on a lot of things throughout the war. Excuse you, hi. I know. But let's hear what Helenus said to his brother. I think they're full brothers. They might be half brothers. I actually don't remember. Hector, son of Priam, a mastermind like Zeus, listen to me now. Let your brother guide you. Have all Trojans and Argives take their seats, and you challenge Achaea's bravest man to duel in bloody combat to the death. It's not the hour to meet your doom. Not yet. I heard a voice of the gods who live forever. When Hector heard that challenge, he rejoiced, and right in the no man's land along his lines he strode, gripping his spear mid-haft, staving men to a standstill, while Agamemnon seated his Argives, geared for combat. This is very similar to what we had in book, what were we at? 3. Yes, book 3, where Hector enters the chat and just flexes his aura, but being like, I can stand in front of all these lines and be like, everybody stop, and everybody does. And even the Greeks are like, hold. We respect Hector, he wants to say something. And Apollo, lord of the silver bow, and Queen Athena, for all the world, like carrion birds, like vultures, slowly settled atop the broad, towering oak, sacred to Zeus, whose battle shield is thunder, relishing those men. Wave on wave of them settling, close ranks shuddering into a dense, bristling glitter of shields and spears and helmets. Quick as a ripple, the west wind suddenly risen shudders down the sea, and the deep sea swell goes dark beneath its force. So, settling waves of Trojan ranks and Achaeans rippled down the plain. And Hector rose and spoke between both sides. Hear me, Trojans, Achaeans geared for combat. I'll let out what the heart inside me urges. Our oaths, our sworn truce. Zeus, the son of Cronus, throned in the clouds, has brought them all to nothing. And all the father decrees is death for both sides at once, until you Argives seize the well-built towers of Troy, or you yourselves are crushed against your ships. But now, seeing the best of all Achaeans fill your ranks, let one whose nerve impels him to fight with me come striding from your lines, a lone champion pitted against Prince Hector. Here are the terms that I set forth. Let Zeus look down, my witness. If that man takes my life with his sharp bronze blade, he will strip my gear and haul it back to his ships. But give my body to friends to carry home again, so Trojan men and Trojan women can do me honor with fitting rites of fire once I am dead. But if I kill him, and Apollo grants me glory, I'll strip his gear and haul it back to sacred Troy and hang it high on the deadly archer's temple walls. But not his body. I'll hand it back to the decked ships, so the long-haired Achaeans can give him full rights, and heap his barrow high by the broad Hellespont. And someday one will say, one of the men to come, steering his oar-swept ship across the wine-dark sea, there's the mound of a man who died in the old days, one of the brave whom glorious Hector killed. So they will say someday, and my fame will never die. My fame will never die. Again, Kleos is all we're talking about. And yes, he's proposing again that, whoever kills whom, winner gets to strip the armor. Again, we talked about the looting is so common. It's just what they do. Again, when it's a BYOB, bring your own bronze, you loot better stuff, and it's also a trophy essentially that you can show. But that, hey, we don't take the body. Like, again, we still follow our sort of moral rules in that regard, which everyone is pretty much going to agree to. A hushed silence went through all the Achaean ranks, ashamed to refuse, afraid to take his challenge. But at long last Menelaus leapt up and spoke, lashing out at them, groaning, heartsick. Oh no, your threats, your bluster, women, not men of Achaea. What disgrace it will be, shame, cringing shame, if not one Danaan now steps up to battle Hector. You can all turn to earth and water, rot away. Look at each of you sitting there, lifeless, lust for glory, God. I'll harness up, I'll fight the man myself. The gods on high, they hold the ropes of victory in their hands. With that, he began to don his handsome gear, and then and there, Menelaus, the death stroke would have blazed before your eyes, dead at the hands of Hector, a far stronger man, if Argive kings had not leapt up and caught you. So this is an interesting, we'll say almost editorial note, a poetic authorial note by Homer saying he would have died. Menelaus would have died. The death stroke would have blazed before your eyes, dead at the hands of Hector, a far stronger man. Which is interesting. We don't often have such a clear-cut comparison between like the really big notable heroes saying, well, that guy's obviously stronger than that guy. It's very rare. And also because we've been building Menelaus. I mean, he's Lord of the War Cry. He's so good. He's so intense. I mean, his reputation essentially precedes him, and we know he's that good. It's been made very clear. But the reason, well, probably one of the main reasons that Hector would be considered stronger in this moment is that one, Menelaus was fighting reasonably nonstop, but also Menelaus is injured. Let's not forget, he got an injury in book 4 when Athena basically tricked one of the Trojan archers to aim an arrow at him. And while he says it's just a flesh wound, it was still basically a kind of an abdomen, a thoracic, is it thoracic? Like a lower abdomen up kind of wound. He still got hit with an arrow. The man has been doing everything right now with an injury. He says it's a flesh wound, but at this point, I'm convinced that these guys are just built of different stuff, and it probably could have really been bad, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. So Hector, yeah, is stronger. Hector is not injured. He's not a walking injury. And meanwhile, Menelaus is. So if you look at a power scale, be like, yeah, well, I'll take the guy who has not got an injury and just had a rest, basically, inside the walls at home, who recharged and then came back out. Yeah, my money's going to go on that guy. I'm going to say that he's probably feeling a little stronger. Yeah, geez, but a scratch. Yeah, and Agamemnon panicked over that, which Agamemnon is not going to be happy about this moment either, where Menelaus is like, fuck it, I'll do it myself. Yeah, fine, I'll do it myself, kind of thing. So, and Atreus, his son himself, powerful Agamemnon, seized your right hand, shouting out your name. You're mad, my prince. No need for such an outburst. Get a grip on yourself, distraught as you are. Just for the sake of rivalry, soldiers' pride. Don't rush to fight with a better man, with Hector, the son of Priam. Ooh, which is, look, these words from Agamemnon are ironic as hell. Because the whole idea that, like, don't give in to the desire for rivalry and soldiers' pride. When we literally kicked off this whole story because of rivalry and soldiers' pride, because of this desire for Kleos. That is literally what the whole argument between him and Achilles was sort of stemming from. I mean, an ego, which is all, again, soldiers' pride. It's all wrapped up in there. And again, and so much of the Iliad, yes, is there to contrast that kind of glory of war, the thing that wraps all the people who participate in it up, you know, with, again, the violent tragedy that awaits those, especially those who, as we say, are not only chasing Kleos, but are chasing it to a kind of excess. Like, you're just going almost just a little bit too far. And even if their fates are not necessarily shown in the poem itself, we know that tragedy is ultimately awaiting them. Like, in the poem itself, we're going to see this happen with Patroclus. We're going to see this happen with Hector. But if you consider even outside of the scope of the poem, I mean, Achilles, Agamemnon, Telamone, and Ajax, like, a lot of these characters are ones who, and Glaukos, who we met in book 6, like, all of these are characters who are sort of seeking Kleos, seeking glory and fame to an excess. And it will ultimately cost them their lives. But it is, again, just sort of ironic that Agamemnon comes and says this. But again, as I say, look at Agamemnon's behavior, and so much of what he says a lot of the time is him being in a very active mental health crisis. Like I said, I think he's having a neurotic break, which is why he swings all over the place. Now, again, he very deeply loves his brother. We know there's a deep relationship between him and Menelaus, so he always immediately steps in to just be like, nope, Menelaus, like, I'm keeping you safe. And there is definitely a part of that. But I think maybe there is also a moment of clarity here where Agamemnon actually kind of shows the reasonably, we would think, okay, ruler that he must be to rule over as much as he does and to have led and gathered all these people. But to say that, like, for him to be able to say, hey, whoa, you're in no position, like, fit fighting position to fight right now. He's feeling top form, you're not. Let's hold on. Like, you're right to be angry, but let's cool our jets for a second. And this is where you just go, Agamemnon, this is where, like, why couldn't you behave this way the whole goddamn poem? He's not going to. Spoilers, but not really. We all know he's a hot mess. But he's having a clear-headed moment here. But it is just sort of ironic that he frames it the way that he does, because we're just like, oh, really? You want to go back to book 1 and tell yourself that? Because pot kettle. I mean, that's all the heroes, pot kettle, but even more so here. It is kind of weirdly adorable for Agamemnon. And while all heroes are ego-driven, Agamemnon outstrips. Agamemnon and I would say Achilles have probably the two biggest freaking egos that are here, without question. Which is why they get into a tiff in book 1. Many others shrink before him. Even Achilles dreads to pit himself against him out on the battle lines where men win glory. Achilles, far and away a stronger man than you. Is he stronger? They all say this, so we have to kind of assume that they do view Achilles as that good of a fighter. He is also very quick. And if you look up what Bronze Age armor looks like, which take with a grain of salt that that's what these guys exactly were wearing, because there's anachronisms all over the place. It's just many historical ages in a trench coat. That shit's heavy. It's not light. The Greeks did like to use reasonably, we'll say, heavily armored infantry. To be quick in that much armor, that's going to weigh that much, does say he is that strong. And Achilles is noted for being so particularly quick that he must be really strong and stronger than the others, and especially even in terms of endurance, in that he can move as quickly as he does, as efficiently as he does, in the same getup that they're all in. So it does make sense that he says he's stronger than you. If he's wearing the same shit but he's moving faster, that would tell you it feels like less to him. Granted, his mother is also a goddess, so he does get a boost there, but whatever. But it is interesting. He says, look, even Achilles doesn't want to fight Hector. Like, that guy who everybody was freaking out is not fighting. Even he doesn't want to fight Hector. And you're like, okay, again, Hector's got aura. Hector has aura. Sit down with the comrades you command. We'll put up another champion to go against this Hector. Fearless is he, and never sated with fighting. He'll gladly sink to a knee and rest, I'd say, if the man comes through alive from the fight he begs for, dueling to the death. Again, the Iron Warrior brought his brother round. Good counsel, fitting too. And again, these little, as I call them, the editorial notes, these little authorial inserts by Homer. I mean, he's right. That's good counsel, and it's fitting counsel. It's like he has these moments where he breaks through his neurosis, and I'm like, damn it, Agamemnon. But again, I love Homer just sort of slyly inserting little editorial comments all over the place. Menelaus yielded at once. His aides, elated, lifted the armor off his shoulders. And then Lord Nestor rose and spoke among the men. No more, or enormous sorrow comes to all Achaea. How he would groan at this, the old horseman Peleus, that fine speaker, the Myrmidons' famed commander. How he rejoiced that day, questioning me in his halls, when he learned the blood and birth of all the Argives. Now, if he heard how all cringe in the face of Hector, time and again he'd stretch his hands to the gods and pray that life beneath would quit his limbs and sink to the house of death. If only Father Zeus, Athena, Apollo, if only I were young again. Fresh as the day we fought by Calydon's rapids, our Pylians in platoons against Arcadian spearmen, under fire's ramparts, round the Yardanus's banks, when Arcadia's champion Erutalion strode forth, a man like a god for power, his shoulders decked with King Aretos' armor, massive Aretos,
The great war club, so they called that hulk, his men-at-arms and their seshed and lovely women. He would never fight with a bow or long spear, no. With his giant iron club he'd break battalions open. That monster. Lycurgus cut him down by stealth. Not force at all, on a footpath so cramped, his iron club was useless fending off his death. There, before he could heft it, a sudden lunge, and Lycurgus's spear had run him through the guts. Flat on his back he went, slamming against the ground, and his killer stripped the armor brazen Ares gave him. He donned it himself for years of grueling war. But then, when Lycurgus grew too old in his halls, he passed it on to a favorite henchman, Erutalion. And sporting that gear, he challenged all our best, and they shook from head to foot, terrified, none with the nerve to face him then. Only I. My hardened courage drove me to fight the man in a hot burst of daring. And I, the youngest trooper of all, I took him on, and Athena gave me glory. By heaven, Erutalion was the biggest, strongest man I ever killed. The huge, lumbering sprawl of him stretching far and wide. Oh, to make me young again, and the strength inside me steady as a rock, Hector, with that flashing helmet, would meet his match in combat in a moment. You, the bravest of all Achaeans, and not one with the spine to battle Hector face to face. Man, when you get a scolding from Nestor, it's like, damn shit.
Is there a reason why Agamemnon is called Iron Warrior? That is a good question. And for that, we have to briefly go look at the Greek, I think. I don't see Mariana in here, so I don't know if Mariana is here. For those who are new, Mariana, I joke, is our resident master of the Greek. I am what is known as a Greekless reader. So I never got the opportunity to study ancient Greek. So I have to often go and fuss my way around. So hold on. Let me see if I can find this section in the Greek, and then I could, because I'd wager it has something to do with the Greek itself, in that it might be a particular, I don't know if it's a poetic translation on the part of Fagles, or if the word is something like iron. This is the end of the Bronze Age. You would move into the Iron Age. I'm wondering, I would wager, is on a late night shift again. Sad. I would wager this is probably a poetic choice by Fagles, trying to describe, like, you know, if you say somebody has like an iron will, like saying like they are unmoving, they're unbending, unbreakable kind of thing. If I had to guess. So let me see here. Where does he say? And the Iron Warrior brought his brother round. Okay. So spake the warrior and turned his brother's mind, for he counseled right. Okay, let me see here. That is line 120. Let me see here. While I hunt through the Greek and do my best to fumble badly. Is the ancient Greek sideros? Sideros in there. I don't see the ancient Greek word for iron, sideros, which is so I'm assuming this is a poetic choice by Fagles to describe like Agamemnon as being like somebody whose will, you don't bend it, you know. And so it's talking about essentially the how do I put this? The force of Agamemnon, his sort of strength of will kind of thing. So if you say that, we would maybe say they're made of like titanium or something, because isn't that like the strongest metal? I don't know metal, so cut me some slack here. I know some things, like that gold is really soft, but you know. So I think that's just a poetic choice by Fagles. Looking at when I was scanning the ancient Greek there, I didn't see the actual word for iron. So again, I think it's just a poetic choice by Fagles, to say that like he's a guy you don't break him, essentially, if that makes sense. Bright, is it Merope? Bright. I'll call you Bright for now because I don't want to mispronounce. The looks Greek in there, but you know, pronunciation always is a thing. But good question. But yeah, so Nestor just gave everybody a good scolding. And again, Nestor is the guy who knows all like the heroes these heroes look up to. He's like, yeah, I was an Argonaut. Yeah, I was there with Heracles. Like, I've seen the dudes you guys wish you were. Like, you don't impress me much. Okay? So when Nestor gives a scolding, it's like, shit, man, because he knows what he's talking about. And again, he's there to give sage counsel. He's clearly not fighting anymore on the field, but he's and however the Pleiades name is pronounced, I am bad at pronouncing names. Okay, it is the name of the Pleiades nymph. Okay, you are welcome. Aha, there we go. The old man's taunts brought 9 men to their feet. First, by far, Agamemnon, Lord of Men, sprang up. Lord of Men, Anaxandron, the only one called the Anax. Those who are on Patreon know I nerded about that word in relation to Agamemnon. And following him, Tydides, powerful Diomedes. Next, the great and little Ajax, armed in fury. How do they make sure Nestor doesn't get injured? Do the Trojans also know not to touch him? Oh, if Nestor were to go out onto the field, all bets are off. But he tends to not go fight on the forefront of the lines. He's kind of running almost strategy in the back. We saw him when they were preparing to go and fight in book 4, that he was getting all of his charioteers and everything else together, and he was talking to them like, here's the plan, here's what you do. He stays behind. He does not go and fight. He's there pretty much to provide good counsel. And that way, if all of a sudden all those guys die out there, he can be like, look, I'm the oldest, the widest, everybody is incredibly pious, like everybody respects him, he can run the shit from behind the scenes. But it's not like he's sort of a character where it'd be like the Trojans go, oh, don't kill that man. It'd be like, no, if he's out there fighting, you fucking kill him. Like, if Nestor had to defend himself, he would, but he's not actively going to fight in what we call the promakos, basically the people who fight on the front lines. He's not doing that. Yeah, he's like in his 60s. He's like, look, I do not have the strength I had when I was, 20. So, but I do have a shit ton of experience and good advice. So I'm here. But no, good question, because you have to wonder, like, oh my God, is he out there on the front lines? What is he doing? Just standing around, like, holding a megaphone? Like, no, he's usually not fighting in the Promakoi. Idomeneus after them, and Idomeneus' good aid, Meriones, a match for the butcher god of war. Eurypylus after them, Euaemon's gallant son. Sorry, there were a lot of vowels that just threw me for a second. Thoas, son of Andraimon, Odysseus out for exploit. All were roused to go up against Prince Hector. Once more the fine old horseman gave commands. Now, shake the lots for all, the first or the last man. We'll see who wins. He's the one to do his Achaean comrades proud, do himself proud too, if he comes through alive from the fight that waits him, dueling to the death. And each soldier scratched his mark on a stone and threw it into Atrides Agamemnon's helmet. All the badasses stood, and little Ajax is also here. I know, little Ajax. So that line I think is super interesting, where it says, and each soldier scratched his mark on a stone. This is one of the only indications of something akin to writing in Homer. And even then, that phrasing of like scratching your mark, it kind of implies these might not be like names or words. It's like a symbol, right? And that's because the world of Homeric Greece, as we call it, so the world of the Iliad and the Odyssey, is functionally illiterate. We never talk about people writing or sending missives. You always send a person, a messenger, like who delivers the message orally. There's really no indication of writing. And again, this world is functionally illiterate. Now, we know the Bronze Age, obviously, had literacy. You have linear A and linear B, these two writing systems. However, once that Bronze Age collapses and you go through the Greek Dark Age, literacy vanishes in the Dark Age. There is no example of writing in the Greek Dark Age. None. And linear A and linear B are absolutely forgotten by the Greeks. Such that when you kick back up into where writing starts coming back into that sort of pre-archaic, archaic age, they've had to borrow a brand new writing system, an alphabet, from the Phoenicians. And nobody ever returns to linear A and linear B. So this is where I say again, technically, these stories are taking place in the late Bronze Age. But because this is a folk memory, it is oral tradition being passed down through numerous centuries where the certain elements of life have changed, I say it's like multiple historical ages wrapped up in a trench coat. It's effectually reflecting a world that never existed, really. That's why there's anachronisms all over the place. But it also explains why nobody writes. These elites who should have been able to write, they can't write. They don't write. Nobody writes. And so this is one of the few moments you have something that seems almost like writing. But again, the idea of scratching your mark, I'm like, that could just be like an X. It could just be a symbol. It's not actually your name. So that's what's so interesting about that. And just one of those neat things to point out. I know we had talked previously about, I think we had, about burial rites. And all of that. But yeah, so it's just one of those many things where it's like, oh, this is not a reflection of the Bronze Age. This is more a reflection of the Dark Age where nobody was writing or reading. Socrates was the one who complained about people writing down stuff. Oh, yeah, Socrates and Plato, they get into some big arguments about how, I think it's Plato, or I think it's Socrates being quoted by Plato, who says like he doesn't trust writing because you can't argue with writing versus a person and oral communication you can debate and argue, which is a whole thing. I read about that in the History of Journals, a book on the history of journals. Wild thing. But yes, so they're all scratching their marks, putting them in the helmet. Fighters prayed. Stretching hands to the gods, a man would murmur, scanning the wide sky. Father Zeus, let Ajax win, or Tydeus' son, or the proud king himself, of all Mycenae's gold. So they prayed, as the old horsemen shook the lots, and one leapt from the helmet, the one they wanted most. Great Ajax's lot it was. Okay. Great Ajax. Telamonian Ajax. Ajax the Greater. Big Ajax. He has entered the chat. My mans. He's here. He's finally here. And fun fact about Telamonian Ajax, as I tend to call him, that is his patronymic. He's the son of Telamon, as we'll find out. It's kind of crazy that later on in the classical period, a whole lot of notable Athenians will try to claim descent from Telamonian Ajax. Even the historian Thucydides is going to claim he is somehow descended from Telamonian Ajax or related to him, like that's one of his ancestors. So we ride hard for Telamonian Ajax. As I like to say, his nickname would be Fridge. They call him a brick house. He's just a massive dude, like literally physically massive. Now, he is the son of King Telamon and Queen Peribea. He is also the half-brother of Teucer, or Teucer, as we hear him called, who is Teucer being a son of Telamon, and actually his war prize, if you will, Priam's sister, who's his war prize he took back. My anxiety leaves. He is ultimately, as a son of King Telamon and Peribea, he's the grandson of Iacchos. Yes, that Iacchos, the judge of the underworld. And therefore a great-grandson of Zeus. He is also a cousin to Achilles and Patroclus. Again, everybody's freaking related. He is one of numerous heroes who are said to have gotten some training and learning from the centaur Chiron. He was said to possess an extremely high level, basically, of combat intelligence alongside basic physical prowess. Because again, he's just massive and strong as hell. But he was apparently really good when fighting. Like he just, like he knew all the moves. He could make really good decisions really quickly. All roads lead to Zeus is true. Again, he's described as being physically massive, even compared to all of the other Greek and Trojan heroes at Troy. Like, this guy is just big. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how big he is. Such that he is considered, as we would say, he's called the bulwark of the Achaeans. If you don't know what a bulwark is, Bulwark. It's a solid wall or like an embankment. It's sort of like a fortified structure used for defense. Metaphorically, we would say like that's any person who acts like a strong protection against danger or injury. Like I want to stand behind Telamoni and Ajax. I feel safe I feel safe when he's out on the field that we're gonna be fine. Like nobody's busting through that guy, kind of thing. He's noted for using what we're going to hear described as a tower shield that's covered by a layer of bronze and 7 cowhides, like whole freaking cowhides, oxen, like 7 of them need to cover that thing. A tower shield. The crazy thing about the tower shield, which it's just a really big shield. This is one of, again, we talked about the silver-studded swords and other things being like kind of anachronisms where it's like, oh, those would have been out of date by the late Bronze Age. Like those would have been considered old weapons. The tower shield is like that. It's out of date by the late Bronze Age. Like nobody's using tower shields anymore. But I would argue that, but it is one of those anachronisms in terms of like weaponry and arms and armaments and all of those things. But I think the use specifically of the tower shield for Ajax, because nobody else gets described as using a tower shield, it's emphasizing his physical size and prowess. Right. Like, I think it also leans into the idea of him being almost like a human shield wall himself. So you give him armor that matches this aura and this presence and this, like the figure that he is to these men. I would argue that it could also just be an anachronism in the same way there's anachronisms all over the place. But I think in terms of like an almost literary level, it makes a lot of sense. Now, we're going to see, a little spoilers we'll say for the Iliad, that over the course of the Iliad, he's not going to receive a single wound the entirety of this epic poem. He's coming out completely unscathed. Nobody touches this guy. So, spoilers for the duel that's going to happen, but you guys all know that Hector's going to live and Ajax dies after Achilles. So, like, we know they're both going to survive this. He's also going to be the only principal character on either side of this war in the Iliad who's not going to receive any kind of like substantial or even just really any assistance from any of the gods who partake in the battle. So we see that they like to pop down and like chat with faves or send dreams or send ideas and whatever. He's nothing. They're like, no, he's good. We don't even need to help him. He's fine. No need. He's got it. He doesn't receive a single bit of divine help, and this man is still going to be so goddamn badass. It's just insane. So yeah, the shield we're going to hear described as likely some sort of pre-existing folk memory, but I also just think on a literary level it makes sense. Yeah, they're like, nah, he's fine. He's got everything he needs. Don't worry about it. We're good. But we're all glad that he got picked. God, see Ajax enter the chat. Well, we got nothing to do. He's fine. And yeah, it is big, big. And the herald took it round through all the ranks, left to right for luck, and showed it to all Achaea's bravest men. None of them knew it. Each denied the mark. But once he'd passed it round and reached the man who had scratched the stone and thrown it in the helmet, Ajax, bent on glory, out went his hand to take it. The herald, pausing beside him, dropped it in, and Ajax knew his mark, and thrilled to see it, flung it down on his feet and shouted, "Friends, the lot is mine, and it fills my heart with joy. I know I can overpower this dazzling Hector. But come, while I strap my battle armor on, all of you, pray to Cronus' son, almighty Zeus. Pray to yourselves in silence, so Trojans cannot hear. No, pray out loud. No one at all to fear. No one can rout me, his will against my will. Not by force, God knows, and not by a sly maneuver either. I'm not such a raw recruit, I like to think, born and bred on Salamis." So great Ajax vaunted, and men prayed to the son of Cronus, King Zeus. They'd call out, scanning the wide sky, "Father Zeus, ruling over all of us from Ida, God of greatness, glory, now let Ajax take this victory, shining triumph. But if you love Hector, if you hold him dear, at least give both men equal strength and glory." So they prayed, as Ajax harnessed himself in burnished, gleaming bronze. And once he had strapped his legs and chest in armor, out he marched like the giant god of battle, wading into the wars of men when Zeus drives them hard to clash and soldier on with heart-devouring hate. So giant Ajax marched, that bulwark of the Achaeans, a grim smile curling below his dark, shaggy brows. Under his legs his power taking immense stride, shaking his spear high, its long shadow trailing. The men of Argos exulted at the sight of him there, but terrible tremors shook each Trojan fighter's knees. Hector himself, his heart pounding against his ribs. But how could he shrink before the enemy, slip back into a crowd of cohorts now? Yeah, he's not Paris, guys. He was the challenger, he with his lust for battle. Ajax strode on, closing, bearing his huge body shield like a rampart, heavy bronze over 7 layers of oxhide. Tychius made it for him, laboring long, the finest leathersmith by far. Over and highly where the master had his home, he crafted that famous gleaming shield for Ajax, layering 7 welted hides of sturdy, well-fed bulls, and hammered an 8th layer of bronze to top it off. And now, holding that great shield before his chest, Telamonian Ajax marched right up to Hector, threatening with his deep, resounding voice. "Hector, now you'll learn, once and for all, in combat man to man, what kind of champions range the Argive ranks. Even besides Achilles, that lionheart who mauls battalions wholesale. Off in his beaked, sea-going ships Achilles lies, raging away at Agamemnon, marshal of armies. But here we are, strong enough to engage you. And plenty of us too. Come, lead off, if you can, with all your fighting power." A flash of his helmet as a rangy Hector shook his head. "Ajax, royal son of Telamon, captain of armies, don't toy with me like a puny, weak-kneed boy, or a woman never trained in works of war. War. I know it well, and the butchery of men. Well, I know shift to the left, shift to the right, my tough, tanned shield. That's what the real drill, defensive fighting means to me. I know it all, how to charge in the rush of plunging horses. I know how to stand and fight to the finish, twist and lunge in the war god's deadly dance. On guard, big and bluff as you are. I've no desire to hit you sniping in on the sly. I'd strike you out in the open. Strike you now." He hurled. His spear's long shadow flew, and it struck Ajax's shield, that awesome 7-layered buckler, right on the 8th, the outside layer of bronze that topped it off. Through 6 hides it tore, but the 7th stopped the relentless brazen point. But great Ajax next, dear to the gods, he hurled, and his spear shadow flew, and the shaft hit Hector's round shield, hit full center, straight through the gleaming hide the heavy weapon drove, ripping down and in through the breastplate, finely worked, tearing the war shirt. Close by Hector's flank it jabbed, but the Trojans swerved aside and dodged black death. Both seized their lances, wrenched them from the shields, and went for each other now like lions rending flesh, or a pair of wild boars whose power never flags. Hector stabbed at the buckler, full center too, not smashing through. The brazen point bent back, and Ajax lunged at him, thrusting hard at his shield, and the shaft punched through, rammed him back in his fury, and grazed his neck, and the dark blood gushed forth. But not even then did Hector quit the battle. Backing, helmet flashing, his strong hand hefting a rock from the field, dark, jagged, a ton weight, he hurled it at Ajax, struck the gigantic shield, 7 ox hides thick, struck right on the jutting boss, and the bronze clanged, echoing round and round as Ajax hoisted a far bigger boulder, swung and whirled it, putting his weight behind it, tremendous force, and the rock crashed home. Hector's shield burst in, hit by a millstone, and Hector's fine knees buckled. Flat on his back he went, his shield crushing down on him, swept him off his feet. But Apollo quickly pulled him up, and now they'd have closed with swords, hacked each other, if heralds of Zeus and men had not come rushing in, one from the Trojans, one from the armed Achaeans, Talthybius and Didius, both with good, clear heads, parting them, holding their staffs between both men. The herald Idaeus, cool, skilled in tactics, urged, "No more, my sons! Don't kill yourselves in combat! Zeus, who marshals the storm cloud, loves you both. You're both great fighters. We all know that full well. The night comes on at last. Best to yield tonight." But the giant Ajax answered briskly, "Wait, Idaeus, tell Hector here to call truce. Mad for a fight. He challenged all our bravest. Let him lead off. I'll take his lead, you see." So, yeah, I know. How is this never in the movie adaptations? Because they want to glaze Achilles so hard, nobody else is allowed to be cool. You think I'm kidding, but that's usually how it goes. Because I'm like, yeah, because Achilles is not that cool. I mean, he's cool, but like other people can be cool too. So here's this bit. Ajax hears this and he's like, whoa, wait. You got to make Hector call it off. And it's basically, Hector called the fight. So Hector, if he's gonna, if they're gonna call off this fight, Hector's got to be the one to call it off because he's the one who called it off, basically. Kind of in the same, and what we're gonna see is kind of in the same vein of what we saw in Book 6 with Diomedes and Glaucus exchanging armor. We're about to have Hector and Ajax basically do the thing, kind of as a sign of like good faith, proof of their own reputation. Say like, yeah, no, we're pausing. We'll fight again tomorrow. And we will also note that unlike in Book 6, Homer's not going to make some sort of editorial comment about it being basically like a bad trade. He's not going to say anything which would tell us the armor pieces that are going to be traded are of like kind of reasonably equal fiscal value. His helmet flashed as Hector nodded. "Yes, Ajax, since gods have given you power, build and sense, you are the strongest spearmen of Achaea. Let us break off this dueling to the death, at least for today. We'll fight again tomorrow, until some fatal power decides between our armies, handing victory down to one side or another. Look, the night comes at last. Best to yield tonight. So you will bring some joy to Achaea's forces, camped beside their ships, and most of all to your own troops, the comrades you command. But I'll go back to the great city of King Priam and bring some joy to the men of Troy and Trojan women trailing their long robes. Thankfully for my return, they'll go to meet the gods and sing their praises. Come, let us give each other gifts, unforgettable gifts, so any man may say, Trojan soldier or Argive, first they fought with heart-devouring hatred, then they parted, bound by pacts of friendship. With that, he gave him his silver-studded sword, slung in its sheath on a supple, well-cut sword strap, and Ajax gave his war belt, glistening purple. Fancy. Glistening purple. Purple shmoney! He got the shmoney! So both men parted. Ajax back to Achaea's armies, Hector back to his thronging Trojans, overjoyed to see him still alive, unharmed, striding back. I mean, unharmed. He's got a couple bruises, grazes, and scrapes, but there's no mortal wounding, to be sure. Free of the rage and hands of Ajax, still unconquered. They escorted him home to Troy, saved past all their hopes, while far across the field the Achaean men-at-arms escorted Ajax, thrilled with victory, back to Agamemnon. Soon as they had gathered within the warlord's tents, he sacrificed an ox in their midst, a full-grown ox, 5 years old, to the towering son of Cronus, Zeus. They skinned the animal quickly, butchered the carcass, expertly cut the meat into pieces, pierced them with spits, roasted them to a turn, and pulled them off the fire. The work done, the feast laid out, they ate well, and no man's hunger lacked a share of the banquet. But the lord of far-flung kingdoms, hero Agamemnon, honored giant Telamonian first and last, with the long savory cuts that line the backbone. And when they put aside desire for food and drink, the old man began to weave his counsel among them. Nestor was first to speak. From the early days, his plans and tactics always seemed the best. With goodwill to the lords, he rose and spoke. King Agamemnon, chiefs of all the Argives, how many long-haired Achaeans lie here dead. And now Ares, the slashing god of war, has swirled their dark blood in Scamander's deep clear stream, and their souls have drifted down to the house of death. So at dawn, you must call a halt to fighting by the Achaeans. Form your units, bring on wagons, gather up the dead, and wheel the corpses back with mules and oxen. Then, at a decent distance from the ships, we burn the bodies, so every soldier here can carry back the bones to a dead man's sons when he sails home again. And let us heap a single great barrow over the pyre, one great communal grave, stretched out across the plain. And fronting it, throw up looming ramparts quickly, a landward wall for ships and troops themselves. And amidst the wall build gateways fitted strong to open a clear path for driving chariots through. And just outside the wall we must dig a trench, a deep ditch, and a broad sweeping ring to block their horse and men and break their charge. Then those headlong Trojans can never rush our armies. Okay, walls. Let's talk about a wall. This is what it gets called the Achaean wall. We've already talked about how the walls of Troy are like characters unto themselves, this sort of impenetrable thing, similarly to the initial walls of Thebes. Time to get nerdy about the wall. Now, the Achaean wall. You want to talk about something scholars have debated since ancient times? It's the fucking Achaean wall. Homer's descriptions of these defensive structures of this Achaean wall, it's honestly pretty vague. It's never going to get more specific. It can be downright confusing at times. It's why people argue about it. We know that obviously Nestor here, he notes like, hey, the wall should have high towers. You need gates of a sufficient width to allow chariot passage. Also have a ditch or moat outside of it, which I can't say his name. It's Roll something K, who's a professor of like classical warfare and such, or historian of classical warfare. If you've ever seen that amazingly almost like semi-viral video where he's just complaining like, where's your ditch? Yeah, you have a ditch. So have a ditch on the outside of it, and we're gonna get told that the Greeks are gonna build this. It's gonna take them basically the rest of the day to build it. It's like that's it. It's gonna take them a day to build this wall, which is let's be real. What's being said here? It's poetically simple. It's coherent, if not frankly practically preposterous. One, that they're only gonna need a day to build something this impressive, and it's gonna be something impressive, as we will hear. But also the idea that like you're only building this now, like this late into the war, you never thought to build like a defensive structure. Y'all have been basically like just chilling there with your ass out in the open, or really your front out the open. Like you never built a wall before this? And when I tell you that has been argued, been tried to made sense of by ancient scholars. Again, Thucydides entered the chat and tried to explain why, and he frankly just made it more confusing. We're all just like, shut up, Thucydides, we love you, but shut up. It is what, like, people go, it's kind of weird that this wall wasn't here already. So yeah, but one of the big things, as I found, it was very fun reading papers on this. One big thing that really gets debated about these walls, and lots of things get debated all the time, it's the number, how many gates are in the wall. Makes one wonder how many soldiers they had at the start, that a wall wasn't needed due to the sheer volume of dudes to cut through. Like, it could be. And there's lots of speculation as to why they didn't do it. Like maybe that they showed up and had an initial victory of some kind that was so good they just sort of like didn't think about it and thought, oh, why bother? We're not going to be here that long. Who knows? But the big debate is often on the number of gates in the wall. Like how many gates? Because we know that Nestor says, hey, you need gates that are wide enough to allow for chariot passage. Okay, so what do? Build one, build numerous ones. And we're going to get descriptions of it. And it's going to be because we're and obviously opinions on how many gates there are have been offered. Now there is as we would find in ancient and sort of scholarship, the minority opinion is that there must be 7 gates to allow for this. But the more popular, what kind of became the majority opinion, came from a scholiast named Aristarchos, who said there was actually only one paili ipelatos, which is what it's called. That's essentially paili being gate and ipelatos meaning fit for horsemanship. So one big gate for which the chariots could go through, and multiple like kind of innumerable like smaller gates, which frankly seems weird. I'm not gonna lie. Like we know these heroes like to roll out on their chariots. You have one gate for chariots. That's just going to cause traffic. But that became the majority opinion. But, and this is where, again, reading papers is fun. And I kind of am going to follow this thought train because, again, so we don't have an exact answer. It just gets argued. I'm going to argue, and I think there's textual evidence to support, that there are 7 gates through which chariots can go through, like 7 big gates. And such a connection, I love the idea of it, and that there's some textual evidence to support it, I think is great. It's a phenomenal parallel with another famous myth that involves a siege warfare against a very well-enforced wall that had not yet fallen, which is that of the 7 against Thebes, and of their children, the Epigonoi, of whom we have members here at Troy fighting on the side of the Greeks. Someone like, I don't know, Diomedes, who was one of the Epigonoi. His father was one of the 7 against Thebes. And the thing about the 7 against Thebes is you can get into the weeds on that story if there's big argument of, is it called, yeah, we know that historically the walls of Thebes, which is Boeotian Thebes, Boeotia is just like a kind of more northern area of Greece, northeastern area of Greece, I believe. That Boeotian Thebes, or just Thebes, historically the wall never had 7 gates. From what archaeology we've done, they never had 7 gates. So you get into a bit of a sort of chicken and the egg argument of, did they say they had 7 gates because ultimately we say there are 7 heroes, 7 attackers who come to, fight, so we give them each a gate to fight at? Or I know, yeah, my break the wall shirt is so perfect when we're talking about a wall. The great irony. Or was it that the number of gates came first, and then we made 7 attackers to attack each gate, like 1 for each gate? That's chicken and the egg argument. You will just have to pick your poison of which you think. Do you think what came first, the number of gates or the number of attackers? Argument. And a lot of this will also, and we'll see also even with the Achaean wall, there's a lot of argument of like influence of Near Eastern myth and how it seeps its way in. Sorry. But the big thing is that, and the big thing, and again, why I'm bringing up the 7 against Thebes, not just because we have Diomedes and because I think, hey, there will be 7 gates. It does tie to the Achaean wall in other ways, in that this wall, as we've said, it's being raised and built really late into the war. Again, it's really odd that it apparently did not exist until this point. And it is what we're going to see, preview for what's going to be coming up after this wall is built and coming up soon, is it's being built precisely on the eve of what will be essentially the Great Trojan Offensive that will bring the Greeks to the very brink of utter destruction in this war, very in accordance with the will of Zeus, if you look at the will of Zeus as directing Achilles' wrath. So they're building this wall right at the point when the Trojans are going to hit back and hit back hard, and the Greeks are going to suffer, because that's what Achilles wants. He wants the Greeks to suffer countless losses so that they beg to have him back, which, again, is why I say I don't think the Iliad wants you to like Achilles much. He's kind of a dick. So, the Greek besiegers The people who are usually doing the sieging are suddenly going to find themselves the besieged. Suddenly, they're going to be playing the role that the Trojans were playing. They're the ones behind the wall. So the Iliad is going to give us, like, the great irony is we talk about what's called teikomachia. Teikomachia is literally a battle around a wall, right? Often we think, oh, yeah, you're battling around the wall of Troy, the walls of Troy. We're battling outside those. No, the great irony is that the true battle around the wall that takes up the bulk of the Iliad is not at the walls of Troy. It's at the wall of this great Achaean wall of the Greek camp. So the Achaean wall just like tends to like loom really large over the picture of like the events of the Iliad. And that perspective of taking the perspective of the besiegers and feeling their pain, really, that's the same perspective you will often see in the narratives of the Seven against Thebes. We talk more about the seven attackers than we ever talk about the seven defenders. Frankly, we're just not that interested in them. The attackers are more interesting. Here's the attackers. They're each hit negate. So that's where I say, again, I like the connection with the Seven against Thebes. And again, also later, the Epigonoi, who are the sons of the Seven against Thebes, because obviously the Seven against Thebes fails. All of the attackers die. But their sons roll up, decades later and actually succeed. So I'm going to go with the idea that there are 7 gates, at least through which chariots can get out. Because I want to go with the notion of the 7 and with the 7 against Thebes. And I will say, if you wish to, you can hold on to that idea, because I'll probably talk about it again in some later books where we keep talking about the wall. Like, we get some more details about the wall. And which kind of give, again, textual support to the idea that there might be 7 gates. But we're not there yet. It comes in later books, but I'm planting that seed now. And while acknowledging there is great debate, and the more majority opinion is that there's apparently only 1 gate that the chariots go out of, and I'm like, that just seems weird. Why would you only make 1 gate for the chariots? Like, I get that, like, we're not using chariots properly in the Iliad, but, like, all of these heroes roll out in their chariots and then jump out of them. But, like, okay, but Aristarchus has the main opinion. But yeah, that is the thing about the Achaean wall. This wall, rather like the walls of Troy, kind of becomes its own character. And it is an element of the Iliad that is so debated and discussed in scholarship. And I mean, going back to antiquity from so many degrees. And if you think we're done with the wall just even in this book, we're not, because we will continue to talk about this wall even ahead in like 100 and something lines. We're going to be talking yet again about this wall. Yeah, Trojans attacking the wall. Wow. This is annoying. Except the Trojans we will see. The Trojans are going to make an assault. And when they make their assault, it's going to be a serious assault. They're actually going to really scare the shit out of the Greeks with how well they do in their next offensive, which I think is actually the next book. So, it's like, oh, that's cute. They're building a wall. This wall, by the way, is impressive. We're going to hear how impressive it is because the gods are going to comment on this Achaean wall. Wall? We know wall. So he advised. All the warlords sounded their assent, and now the Trojans collected high on the crest of Troy. They were shaken, distracted men at Priam's gates. But the clear-headed Antenor opened up among them. Hear me, Trojans, Dardans, all our loyal allies. I must speak out with the heart inside me urges. On with it. Give Argive Helen and all her treasures back to Atreus' sons to take away at last. We broke our sworn truce. We fight as outlaws. True. And what profit for us in the long run? Nothing. Unless we do exactly as I say. Okay. That is, Antenor comes in and says, fuck it, just give her back. Just give her and all the shit Paris stole back. And this line is interesting. We broke our sworn truce. We fight as outlaws. Those are serious words. And what's important to note is like, okay, and Homer gave us our note here that clear-headed Antenor. Okay, he's clear-headed. He's wise. He's thinking straight. This is not fear talking. Like, He's thought about this. This is a and what he's saying clearly has a ring of truth to it. And that then leaves the question, okay, what sworn truce did you break? Why do you say you fight as outlaws? I'm sure there's great debate over that. I propose there are three possibilities that I can think of, which is one, the initial taking of Helen from Sparta. It's a breaking of Xenia. As we know, it's the breaking of a sworn truce in that way. Maybe we're going that far back. It could be the terms that Hector set for the Paris versus Menelaus duel and Paris's failure to meet them in book 3, where, Hector said, it ends when one defeats the other. Now, Agamemnon had made the stipulation that he wants it to be one kills the other. So we had these two different kind of rule sets or rules of play, if you will, for the duel and how you determine a victory. And nobody had actually kind of made one consensus. So it could be, hey, maybe they're talking about what Hector said, because if we go by what Hector had said for that Paris and Menelaus duel, Paris lost. And then, and this is the third possibility I think of, is that Troy then shot an arrow at Menelaus after Paris, got whisked away by Aphrodite. So I'm like, maybe? But what exactly he's talking about, I'm not sure. And I couldn't find any sort of concrete answer to that. So I was like, the three possibilities I can think of are the taking of Helen from Sparta, the fact that they're still fighting and not declaring and, not handing over everything and saying like, okay, well, the Paris versus Menelaus duel, Menelaus won. Or it could be, yeah, and then we might have had an archer who shot an arrow at Menelaus. So, options? But, and again, normally it could be like, oh, maybe he's just talking out of fear, except that Homer tells us he's clear-headed. Homer's making it very clear this guy is not just speaking out of fear. He's not talking out of his ass. He's clearly making some kind of point. Now, obviously, again, we've had the whole discussion of why didn't Troy just give Helen back? Obviously, they couldn't. Once Paris rolls up with her, and he's saying, well, Aphrodite promised me her, they're like, fuck. She's a gift of a god. There's nothing we can do about it. Like, we can't piss off a god. So really, everyone but Paris is in like the most shit situation because of Paris. There's a reason he's the worst. But Antenor is finally just like, look, fuck it. It's year 9. This has been going on for way too fucking long. Why are we paying the price for this fucking moron's sins? Like, just give her back. Like, just fuck it. Fuck it all, basically. Frankly, I would just say, just fucking kill Paris. But, that wouldn't be good. He's a prince. He's unfortunately got fucking plot armor right now. And Aphrodite's on his side, so she keeps saving him when he's about to die. But so he pressed the point, then took his seat. And among them stood magnificent Paris now, fair-haired Helen's lord. Twitch. And he came back with a winging burst in answer. Stop, Antenor. No more of your hot insistence. It repels me. You must have something better than this to say. But if you are serious, speaking from the heart, the gods themselves have blotted out your senses. Now, I say this to our stallion-breaking Trojans. I say, no. Straight out, I won't give up the woman. But these treasures I once hauled home from Argos, I'll return them all and add my own stores. Okay. Once again, poor fucking Helen getting fucking objectified by Paris. He essentially, as much as he says, no, I won't give her back, he does equate her with the physical and, we'll say fiscal, like treasures that he also stole from Menelaus. Like, let's not forget, he didn't just take Helen. He robbed Menelaus of a bunch of stuff while he was at it. And he's just like, I'm not going to give her back, but I'll give back the stuff. As if, in his mind, that should settle this. Yeah, that's equal. I can just give her back the stuff. I mean, she's just stuff. In Paris's mind, this is why I say he objectifies her. She is like an object. She is equal to all this stuff. He's like, well, I want to keep her. Because I guess you can't, have sex with stuff? But he'll give back the stuff as if that's going to settle this. As if that would assuage Menelaus. Buddy. Ugh. And even worse, again, he also says, I won't give up the woman. He doesn't even use her name. it is so the objectification of Helen by all these men and the gods. So it's really not just men, women, the gods. Like, it's so awful, and he is true. He makes me angry. And that's unlike Antenor, who even calls her like Argive. I think he calls it what, Argive Helen. At least he fucking refers to her by name. Paris is like the woman. Ah! I want to hit that man so bad. You have no idea how much I hate that man. And Mariana is not here to in any way try and be like, well, and I'll be like, no, this is bad. Actually, to be fair, Mariana, I think would agree that no, that's pretty bad. With that concession, oh, boo-hoo, you're gonna give up the stuff you stole in breaking Xenia. You have no leg to stand on. The gods for strong advice. And with goodwill toward all, he swayed his people. Hear me, Trojans, Dardans, all our loyal allies. I must speak out with heart inside me urges. Now, take your evening meal throughout the city, just as you always have, and stand on your watches, each man wide awake. And then, at first light, let the herald Idaeus go to the beaked ships, and tell the Atridae, Agamemnon and Menelaus, the offer of Paris, who caused our long, hard campaign. Let Idaeus add this too, a good, sound proposal. See if they are willing to halt the brutal war until we can burn the bodies of our dead. We'll fight again tomorrow, until some fatal power decides between us both, handing victory down to our side or the other. And this is where I say, yeah, he may not say it like in words like Hector, but I'm pretty sure Priam doesn't even like Paris, because the offer of Paris, who caused our long, like, yeah, it's this bitch's fault. It's like, I can't believe I have to go. He's literally like Zeus with Ares, where like Zeus is like, if you were not my son, I give a bet that Priam is constantly thinking, if this were not my son. Like, god damn it. Like, you're supposed to be dead! Oh. If we can't give Helen back straight up, give them Paris too. I mean, honestly, it's unfortunate that Paris literally has Aphrodite so hard in his corner protecting him, because you're just like... His people hung on his words, and all obeyed the king. They took their meal by ranks throughout the army. And at first light, Idaeus went to the beaked ships, and out on the meeting grounds he found the Argives, veterans close by the stern of Agamemnon's ship. Yeah, to the disappointment of all, Paris lives. Taking his stand right in the milling troops, the herald called out in a high, firm voice. Sons of Atreus, captains of all Achaeans, Priam and noble Trojans command me to report, if it proves acceptable, pleasing to one and all, the offer of Paris, who caused our long, hard campaign. All the treasures that filled his hollow ships, and the prince hauled home to Troy, would to God he'd drowned before that day. He'll return them all, and add from his own stores. But the lawful wife of Menelaus, renowned Menelaus, he will not give her up. Paris makes that clear, though all Troy commands him to do precisely that. They tell me to add this too, a good, sound proposal. If you are willing, come. We'll halt the brutal war until we can burn the bodies of our dead. We'll fight again tomorrow, until some fatal power decides between us both, handing victory down to one side or the other. Yeah, would to gods he drowned before that day. And also, he will not give her up. Paris makes that clear, though all Troy commands him to do precisely that. Idaeus' speech, I mean, it is withering towards Paris. What we're seeing in Idaeus is what little love and respect there is for the Trojan prince within the city itself. Again, like, nobody really likes Paris. He does also kind of continue the objectification of Helen, like Paris. He doesn't bother to refer to her by her name. He just says the law, but he does say the lawful wife of Menelaus. He makes it clear. We understand we are the bad guys here. Please understand we're dealing with the bad guy within us, which is Paris, and we're all really mad at him too. So it's a really interesting wordplay and like wordsmanship that we have here in the way that he's just like, yeah, Paris is, he's literally, they're throwing Paris under the chariot. Like they are recognizing. This is where I say again, the question of we broke our sworn truce, we fight as outlaws. I mean, part of that, again, as I say, is this going all the way back to Helen? Like they're recognizing like we are not the good guys in this situation. Like nobody likes us right now. And by that, and then they all look at Paris going, and that's because of this fucker. One guy has threatened this entire city, which ultimately does sort of mean the kingdom. Like the kingdom of Troy is more than just the city of Troy, but Troy's like the crown jewel. It's the capital. You take that, you basically take the kingdom. Yeah, they are the bad guys by association. They're like, we're the ones who are considered fighting as outlaws here because this guy did what he did. And yeah, a goddess told him like it was okay and he was promised, but like he did what he did. Frankly, I'd be like, it would have been different if just Aphrodite mindfucked Helen to just walk her own way out of the house and to Paris like on her own. But no, you had to go to Sparta and steal her. Like in their minds, it probably would be different. For us, we still go, and that's a loss of her autonomy, but the political situation would be maybe slightly different at that point. But yes, I love how Idios is just so withering to Paris. It just is absolutely not going to boost him up. He's not going to do him favors. He's like, look, we get what the situation is. Please understand that we don't love it either. That nobody's fucking happy with him right now. Paris is Bear, Helen is Nikki, Aphrodite is the one wish Willow. Yeah, no, literally, if anybody has seen the film Obsession, what happens to Nikki in that film is essentially what had happened to Helen, we would say, is that like her autonomy was taken from her. Now, again, let's also note with Helen, there is argument that there are other scholars, and again, this goes back to ancient times, saying that she went willingly, that there was no divine, intervention or anything, like she just went on her own, and like, I prefer the Homeric interpretation that makes it clear that no, she did not. That Aphrodite influenced her to go, and I'm like, nope. At that point, that's not on her. But yes. Actually, interestingly enough, had that conversation with my dad where I explained, he goes, well, then why did she, because he asked, he was like, why did she leave then? Like, if she's not, like, why did she go? And I was like, well, because the gods, like, kind of messed with her mind and made her do it. And he was just like, oh, okay. I think he honestly, like, a lot of people say they know the story of the Trojan War, and, like, bits and pieces. And it's like, do you actually know it? Maybe not. I have a friend who's going through who's reading the Iliad. I think for her, for the first time, she realized, she's like, I don't think I ever read it, because I had not realized like all the stuff that like I'm very aware of the story of the war at Troy, that like so much of it is like not in the Iliad. So it's been very fun, because I've also just like sent tons of academic articles and stuff her way, and her partner, he's a tenure track at Harvard in classical philosophy, so he knows a lot about the topic as well. So she's like, it's been pretty wild to like basically dip into our sort of deep little niche. She is also team fuck Paris. Oh my God, he's the worst, which I'm like, yes, it does make it fun, doesn't it? It's very fun to actively hate Paris. Anyway, sorry, tangent, woo, ADHD, excellent. But yes, Idios is like, yeah, no, fuck Paris, we hate him too, but here's the proposal I bring. So he spoke, and a hushed silence went through all the ranks. Finally, Diomedes, lord of the war cry, shouted out, no one touch the treasures of Paris, Helen either. It's obvious. Any fool can see it. Now at last, the neck of Troy's in the noose. Her doom is sealed. Yeah. Again, also, Diomedes, I love you, but let's not equate the treasures of Paris, aka the treasures of Menelaus, and yeah, Paris is adding some, but like, let's not equate Helen with those. Again, she does get objectified by basically every character in the story, except for Menelaus! I just want to point that out. I just need to point that out. I will always point it out. But Diomedes is like, huh, we've got them on the back foot. Okay. It's not necessarily I will say, I think most of the people who interpret her as being willing are the types to dismiss this kind of abuse in real life, whether deliberately or through sheer lack of perspective. It could be, but there is also, versions and interpretations of source where Aphrodite does not have to in any way influence Helen to go. Therefore, she does make the choice and go. For a lot of people, it does come down to a question of how much autonomy and how active is Helen in her own story. And again, there's a lot of debate over it. There's no easy, simple answer. And also because the sources themselves and of like the story will not always agree with each other because they're being written down in different times from different areas of Greece. So it comes down to a lot of interpretation, which is why I say there's often no right or wrong answer with a lot of the analysis and interpretation you get, because you can. I have literally read papers that argued two different things, like the same argument, but on either side, and both of them brought compelling textual evidence. And it comes down to a lot of interpretation. And again, the case of Helen, it is something that has been argued and debated and interpreted and even presented a myriad of ways since antiquity. So it's really messy. I mean, it makes it rife for interpretation. In that way, you could say it's fun to interpret. I tend to go with the interpretation that I have, obviously. And I pull it, a lot of it, I like to pull from kind of what we get in Homer and what we get told in Homer. And that interpretation tells me that in what the textual evidence and everything in that tells me, so Aphrodite interfered. She made this happen. Helen left with like no real bodily autonomy because Aphrodite interfered, as we see even in book 3. So like that's where I can go, okay, this is where I go. Was the source Roman? If she was willing, was Roman? No, there are even the Greeks have even argued this. Like this is even pre-Rome. The Greeks were arguing it. It's been a topic of discussion and scholarly debate even pre-Rome. Is it like how modern people like to rewrite the Hades of Persephone story to give Persephone agency? She didn't have any agency. Is there ancient sources? We're talking ancient sources for both. Like ancient sources, depending on how they write it, it's all argument. It's a lot of argument and debate. Myriad, yes, it's a good word. I love the word myriad. So it's not like, oh, modern scholars are now just coming up with this idea. No, I mean literally the debates and the sources all the way back. All the way back. And that's where I always say, again, with a lot of the cases, we'll do brief sneak peek to the Great Odyssey yappening that's coming this coming next week. Was I talked about the Helen and Menelaus in Nolan's film and how I had to acknowledge that even though I may not have loved how they were presented, I can't argue that it's like flying in the face of sources or stuff like that, that it's like totally out of pocket. I can't, because it's like, yeah, it doesn't match my interpretation, but it's not technically wrong. That's why often there's no real right or wrong in a lot of those cases. So yeah, it's a big debate, always debate. But yeah, so Diomedes is like, we got him on the back foot, kids, and we're all just like, oh, Diomedes, you don't know what's coming next book. All the Achaean soldiers roared out their assent, stirred by the stallion-breaking lord's reply. And King Agamemnon rounded on Idaeus. There's the Achaeans' answer, Idaeus. A declaration you can hear for yourself. It is my pleasure too. But about the dead, I'd never grudge their burning. No holding back for the bodies of the fallen. Once they are gone, let fire soothe them quickly. That is my sworn pledge. Zeus, my witness now. Okay. Hera's lord who thunder drums the sky. So, Agamemnon says about the dead. Yeah, no, I'm not going to make a fuss. We absolutely do need to burn our dead and give them rights. And as I say, again, book 7, I say, is Agamemnon breaking through the neurosis. He's really pretty clear-headed in this book. He's able to show himself really as that true Anaxandron, that true Lord of Men, that like the guy who's like, oh yeah, he's charismatic, he's holding it down, he's getting it together. I mean, he can be arrogant as hell, but I mean, welcome to the Greek heroes. And I say this shows him as better than Achilles in the Iliad. Remember, Agamemnon had them all basically start this fight, this particular round of fighting, because he got a dream, that deceptive dream from Zeus, that he was going to take Troy today. Today. Obviously, that has not happened. And instead of throwing a conniption fit, he's like, well, you know what? You're right. We do need to show proper honors to the dead. We will pause all the fighting. So he shows himself in this moment as better than Achilles will show himself later. He may want to take Troy, and he thought he was taking it today, but he will not sully the fallen. He will not desecrate the bodies of the dead. He's absolutely like, no, no, we do shit right. We get that done. Also gives them time to build a wall, but we get shit done. And yeah, no, burning the dead, besides honoring them, giving them proper rights. You reduce the spread of diseases with rotting bodies, which they all know well. We've had whole discussions about what's going to happen. Bodies made carrion, and they already went through a plague. They're like, no, we're good. We don't need any more of that. But it is also the big thing is difference in behavior between what we will see from Achilles later, and we've been foreshadowing how Achilles is not going to do this. Book 6. The big foreshadowing was Andromache saying, well, Achilles, when they sacked my hometown, he killed my father, so I heard, but, he at least, gave him proper honors and whatever, which we're all just like, oh, the ironic foreshadowing, all of the ironic foreshadowing, because he will not do that for Hector. Yeah. With that oath, he raised his scepter high in the eyes of all the gods, and the Dios turned, trailing back to sacred Troy. There they sat in assembly, Trojans, Dardans, all collected together, waiting long and tense for the herald to return. And home Idaeus came, delivered his message, standing in their midst, and they fell to making hurried preparations, dividing the labors quickly. 2 detachments, one to gather the bodies, one the timber. And far on the other side, Achaean troops came streaming out of the well-benched ships, some to gather the bodies, some the timber. I noticed both in the Odyssey and now the Iliad, both show the norm of proper behavior, but also show extreme examples of breaking that norm and what the consequences are for breaking them. Yep. And that ties often into hubris. I mean, so much is often caused as a result of hubris, and hubris, remember, always has a kind of element of violence to it, which is what we see. If you say fuck, our proper etiquette, fuck our morals, our ethics, our way of behaving, you're basically saying fuck humanity. And it's like, oh, buddy, no. It's the same way why with moments of Aristeia, the hero, even though he achieves an almost godlike moment, has to come back to humanity. If you exclude yourself out of that and say, no, fuck it, I'm better than you, or, fuck humanity and its rules, it never ends well for you. Because no. You are a human. Behave as such. Just as the sun began to strike the ploughlands, rising out of the deep, calm flow of the ocean river to climb the vaulting sky, the opposing armies met, and hard as it was to recognize each man, each body, with clear water they washed the clotted blood away and lifted them onto wagons, weeping warm tears. Priam forbade his people to wail aloud. In silence, they piled the corpses on the pyre, their hearts breaking, burned them down to ash, and returned to sacred Troy. And just so on the other side, Achaean men-at-arms piled the corpses on the pyre, their hearts breaking, burned them down to ash, and returned to the hollow ships. Then, with the daybreak not quite risen in dawn, the night and day still deadlocked, round the pyre a work brigade of picked Achaeans grouped. They heaped a single great barrow over the corpse fire, one great communal grave stretched out across the plain, and fronting it threw up looming ramparts quickly, a landward wall for ships and troops themselves. And amidst the wall built gateways fitted strong to open a clear path for driving chariots through. And against the fortress just outside the wall, the men dug an enormous trench, broad and deep, and drove sharp stakes to guard it. So they labored, the long-haired Achaeans, while the gods aloft, seated at ease beside the lord of lightning, Zeus, gazed down on the grand work of Argives, armed in bronze. Poseidon, the god whose breakers shake the land, began. Father Zeus, is there a man on the whole wide earth who still informs the gods of all his plans, his schemes? Don't you see? Look there.
The long-haired Achaeans have flung that rampart up against their ships. Around it they have dug an enormous deep trench and never offered the gods 100 splendid bulls. But its fame will spread as far as the light of dawn, and men will forget those ramparts I and Apollo reared for Troy in the old days, for the hero Laomedon. We broke our backs with labor. But filled with anger, Zeus, who marshals the thunderheads, let loose now. Unbelievable! God of the earthquake, you with your massive power, why are you moaning so? Another god might fear their wall, their idle whim, one far weaker than you in strength of hand and fury. Your own fame goes spreading far as the light of dawn. Come now, just wait till these long-haired Achaeans sail back in their ships to the fatherland they love. Then batter their wall, sweep it into the salt breakers, and pile over the endless beach your drifts of sand again. Level it to your heart's content, the Argives' mighty wall. Okay, we're talking about the wall again. So, Poseidon, a little pissed off. He's angry. His anger, however, over the insolence he sees it of these Greeks to raise such a great monument, this Achaean wall, which again, they do in a day, which is wild. That could potentially, as he sees it, surpass in fame the walls of Troy that he himself built with Apollo. And as he says, all without giving, as he says, the sacrifice of 100 splendid bulls, what get called hecatombs, to the gods. For him, we're being presented a two-pronged issue. From a narrative perspective, you failed to offer the hecatombs. The failure to offer this. This failure to offer proper sacrifices to the gods as a reason for Poseidon's displeasure, which apparently my notes decided to autocorrect as dysplasia. I don't know why. Cool. Weird. And the wall's and what will be the wall's eventual ruin. Spoilers. We're going to talk more about the wall's ruin because we're going to get a big, beautiful image of it in book, I think it's 12, might be 14. It's one of those two. Comes across as what could be called motive hunting. Basically, it's a commonplace. It's something that's been inserted in order to justify an action that has no seeming cause. Like, really? That's the reason. And honestly, the idea of forgetting to, or this forgetfulness, this leaving out of sacrifices, it is kind of surprising, given the whole idea of this wall came from Nestor, who's incredibly pious and not known to forget things like that. So it's kind of odd. And again, there's a lot of oddities surrounding the Achaean wall. And then the other issue is Poseidon's concern about his own kleos. Honestly, it seems kind of misplaced and even a bit groundless. And that's something that Zeus even says. He's like, another god might fear their wall, their idle whim, but like, why are you afraid of it? It's like, that makes no sense. And he also, but even still, he kind of indulges Poseidon. He's like, look, well, fine. If you're that worried, he's like, so destroy it out when the war's done and the Greeks leave. Which, if for those of us from Odyssey, this is all sounding really familiar, isn't it? Kind of sounds like what happened with the Phaeacians, right? Where Poseidon was like, look, they insult me. This is an effect of my kleos. Like, I've been going after Achilles going after Odysseus. These guys help them. And Zeus is like, dude, you have nothing to worry about. But there is that prophecy. So, like, go ahead and do what you want. Oh, and by the way, here's an extra, like, turn the ship to stone, freak them out, and all of that. This is a very similar conversation we have in the Odyssey. But here in the Iliad, all of essentially this fuss that Poseidon is raising over what is effectively a hastily built wall. Yeah, you come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding, asking for my help. Really. Like, all this fuss over a hastily built wall that is ultimately not even going to succeed in its immediate purpose of protecting the Greek ships. Like, literally the next book, like, it's not even going to do its job. It just seems really odd. Because honestly, if Poseidon, or frankly, any of the other gods, were really that vexed, really that angry at the building of the Achaean wall, wouldn't a more active sign of their anger be something
other than just destruction of the wall only after the Greeks no longer have need of it? Like, why not just destroy it now? If it really is that big of a deal. Why wait until the war's done and, like, it's no longer... I thought Kleos was only reserved for Greek heroes. No, it's not. It's essentially what they're talking about here. Fame, glory, Kleos. For the gods, it's not identical to what the heroes want, but it's absolutely something that the Greek gods think about, as it has to do with your reputation and your perceived sense of power when it comes to the gods. So, ultimately, this wall really seems less like an actual thing that's meant to protect them. We say, like, narratively. It's really more a pretext. And Poseidon's bitching about it is more a pretext for introducing the rather, we could say, almost pathetic and kind of solemn lines in which its very destruction, the obliteration of this wall, puts the Trojan War decisively into a remote past. Here in book 7, and then I do believe, yeah, it's book 12, where we're going to get this whole image of how the wall gets destroyed by Poseidon and also Apollo. So ultimately, what we're getting here is the intrusion of a theme that's kind of otherwise been suppressed within Homer, which is the idea of the war at Troy being a myth of destruction. And we'll say, spoilers for what we will get in kind of book 12, which is the destruction of the wall ultimately is going to involve rivers coming and, like, smashing through the wall and destroying it. A part of it is, or we're explaining why there's nothing left of the Achaean wall, because ultimately, even at digging at Hysteric, we don't have like any remnants of any sort of, like, wall built by the Achaeans. But this ties into, I'm doing my best to be a little vague because we're going to talk way more about this in book 12, is the idea of this being in a very remote past comes down to, and there's different versions of this, where exactly the ancient Greeks saw this sort of age of heroes existing in their timeline, the way they saw it. Which generally it is, you have the Bronze Age. Like, they understood the age of bronze because they've moved past it by now, by the time this is getting written down, right? Then they say there's an age of heroes, which almost, like, Bronze Age declines, but then it almost seems to briefly reverse with the heroes, and then you hit kind of the Dark Age, moving into their age of iron that they are now currently in. And Hesiod is going to give us a lot of this. There comes this idea that the war at Troy is ultimately this myth of destruction. Because remember, we talked about, like, what was the will of Zeus? One option, if you look outside the narrative of the Iliad, the will of Zeus is the war at Troy, which is going to, in one version of the story, coming from, like, the Kypri and other things, Zeus needed to essentially, there was overpopulation. He's using this to literally just wipe out a whole bunch of people to ease the problem of overpopulation. And in some versions, there's also a question of impiety, which then leads to what is a very famous story in which, we'll say, water and flood and flooding and all that gets involved, which involves eradication of most of the human race, as is seen at the time, because of potentially perceived impiety to a deity. Is that ringing bells for anybody who may have grown up with a, say, Abrahamic religion? Are we ringing bells? A great deluge, possibly. Possibly. Yeah. If you thought the Great Flood, Noah, literally the flood myth. Which, mind you, the Greeks do have their own, as we would say, deluge, their own flood myth. However, is there only one story ever? I know, everybody's going like, yeah, Noah's Ark, we get it. Right, I know. Just look, the chat is slow, I had to check. Destruction of a city due to impiety. Yeah, well, we're not really destroying... Troy is being destroyed for all sorts of reasons. The impiety isn't necessarily being done by the Trojans. It's sort of overall. It's the Greek. There's a lot of argument. Again, we'll talk more about this in book 12, but keep in mind the idea of the wall, and know that its destruction is ultimately going to come mostly from the idea of water fully wrecking its shit. Although, and granted, Apollo is going to come through and do a whole lot of damage to it, like a kid destroying a sandcastle. Of course he is. it does seem that this is sort of a potential nod almost at various things involving where they viewed the Age of Heroes on the timeline, what they saw of well, another thing that could be referenced, not just Sodom and Gomorrah, Babel, the Tower of Babel, a great structure that is brought up that offends the gods so much they must destroy it. It's more the Achaean Wall is closer to the Tower of Babel than anything else. But bringing in then an almost seeming flood myth and all of that. Again, we will talk far more about this in book 12 when we get the full imagery, like an almost flash forward into what's going to happen to the Achaean Wall. But hold on to that. So hold on to the Achaean Wall. Understand that a lot of what we're seeing with Poseidon's anger over it does seem really petty, does seem really odd. Like, it's really odd, because seriously, this wall, frankly, doesn't do that much good at the end of the day. It's really, frankly, it's impressive, but they'll destroy it. There'll be nothing left of it. So the inclusion of Poseidon having this moment of, well, what the heck, and how angry he gets. And then later, as we see, the destruction of it later by essentially a flood, which doesn't just like destroy it, it disperses it, is the inclusion essentially of the idea of the theme of the war at Troy being an overall myth of destruction, in the same way that something like the flood is, or the like, in as they would say with Near Eastern myth. That is a theme that ultimately is kind of suppressed in the Iliad because we're taking such a narrow focus. But it's like Homer kind of subtly weaves it in there, and he uses it to suit his narrative. So keep that in mind. And again, we will bring it back up in, I do believe it is book 12, where we're going to talk about, we're going to see how the wall gets destroyed, and I will talk more about that. I'll get nerdy about Hesiod, and the question of are all the Achaeans who we're seeing here, these heroes, were they a completely different race from what we would say the present day, for Homer, the present day Greeks were there? There's some cool shit in there, but I don't want to get to it now because I'd have to get a little linguistically nerdy, and I can't right now because the particular linguistics are in the later book. Anyway, yes, Poseidon throws kind of a little mini tantrum, similar to like what he's going to do. Like I say, the parallel sibling of it in the Odyssey, and in both cases, Zeus goes, "You have nothing to worry about, but go ahead and flex your power if you want." But in both cases, the flexing of the power. And Mariana's, no, it's not that Mariana is not here. It's that the linguistic thing, it's literally words that that I need to refer to are in like book 12. So like we actually haven't hit that moment yet. So I don't want to talk about it now when we're not at that point yet. Right? Like I know I know the lines where the Greek is, and I know how it works. It's in a different book. But yeah, so in both these cases, Zeus says, well, okay, fine, destroy the shit. But he also has him do stuff after the main objective of, we'll say, the primary heroes is achieved. So here, it's like, okay, well, yeah, destroy the Achaean wall. You know, after they've beaten Troy and left, so the wall is useless. In the same way with the Phaeacians, he's like, okay, we'll punish the Phaeacians. You know, and just for shits and giggles, turn that ship to stone, freak them out, and then drop the mountain on them. But that's after Odysseus has now returned to Ithaca. It's kind of like, sure, go ahead. But it does seem really pointless. And maybe it's like, what's the big deal? And it's, again, tying into these myths of destruction that are ultimately in Iliad, and I'd say even in Odyssey, kind of suppressed in favor of the other themes that are more prescient to the narrative, but Homer takes them and kind of twists them and subtly uses them to his advantage in telling his story. And these are little like hints of it, which is cool stuff. And then finally, just a reminder again, as Poseidon says, the ramparts I and Apollo reared for Troy in the old days, we broke our backs with labor. Remember, as a result of failing in their coup against Zeus, he sent them to work for a year on the orders of Laomedon, who was the king of Troy, as punishment. And again, after the wall's completion, Laomedon said, well, I'm not going to pay you. I'm not going to say thank you for doing this for me. So Apollo sent them a plague, and Poseidon sent a giant sea monster to attack the city. They did manage to placate Apollo, but they used Heracles to defeat the sea monster, and then also didn't pay Heracles. So Heracles, in a week, did what takes all of these Greeks a decade. So they, again, they are not, the Trojans are firmly on Poseidon's shit list. So it is kind of crazy that like he's angry at the Greeks. He's normally firmly on the side of the Greeks, and he is still on their side in the war. But he's like, wait, what the fuck? Why are they building this wall? Finished 1177 BC. Would the epic cycle of the destruction of Troy be the cultural memory of collapse of the Bronze Age? Be the memory of the collapse from the POV of some of the sea peoples? From the POV of some of the sea peoples. You sort of asked a question twice, so Harold, I think there are words missing in your question. This is not the POV of the sea peoples in any way. Because the Greeks did not see themselves as the sea people. Well, possible. I mean, I say in that you asked the question, would the epic cycle be the destruction of Troy? Would the epic cycle of the destruction of Troy be the cultural memory of collapse of the Bronze Age, be the memory of the collapse from the POV of some of the sea peoples? So I think there's words missing in there somewhere, because I think you're asking two questions, but it grammatically, I'm just a little confused. It's obvious that the story of Troy is dealing with folk memory of the downfall of the Bronze Age. Absolutely. I mean, again, you can potentially argue is the way that the destruction of Troy occurs. Is it? No, it's okay. I was just sort of like I was sort of thrown by the question, because I was like, I got two, and there were words missing. It is absolutely related, we would say, to the fall of the Bronze Age. That's general consensus. And the destruction of Troy, is that related to the folk memory of the sacking and the burning and destruction of the palaces at Mycenae and at Pylos, which are said to have been done by some of these, as we call them, the sea peoples. Again, we call them that. They did not call them that. They were all these disparate tribes. And again, there is argument that maybe one of these sea peoples could have been the Achaeans, but those are not the ones who were saying were necessarily attacking Greece. They would have been attacking further east. Again, they were sort of raiding and going all throughout the Mediterranean. So this is not the POV of some of the sea peoples. No, because the Greeks are not putting themselves with the sea peoples. So no on that front. But is the myth of Troy's destruction like related to the fall of the Bronze Age? Yes, absolutely. Because that was the destruction of basically a whole culture. Like, absolutely. It's the idea of a myth of destruction is the ending of an entire civilization. So yes, the ending of one civilization. And the Greeks had a sort of mythological, maybe they were the Phoenicians. Agnes, if you really want to know a little bit more of what Harold is talking about, I would recommend the book 1177 BC, The Year Civilization Collapsed by Eric Klein. It's very short. He talks a bit about the sea peoples in like the prologue. It's like the first freaking page. He talks about these idea of the sea peoples. So anyway, yeah, we'll go continue on. It sounds like the insult to Poseidon is the Achaean wall can rival the walls of Troy, even though the Trojan wall is the work of the gods, while the Achaean is man-made. Am I reading that right? Yes. Yeah. So obviously, likely, I do believe is like Poseidon and Apollo assisted in building the walls of Troy. Like they did the brunt of the work. Men would have helped. But yeah, the idea is that it's not only just that it's built by man. It's that they also ended up doing it in like a day. And it's like, wait, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean you did that in a day? Which again is why this feels like the whole thing of the Achaean wall is this really odd moment in the Iliad, and why it's been debated since antiquity from all sorts of different angles. Like, wait, they didn't have a wall till now? Man, how did they build that in a day? Well, how many gates do you think it had? Like, wait, so why is Poseidon, what is all this? And I'm like, there's a lot going on. Again, why it's rife for, yeah, am I a joke to you? Why this is rife for debate and discussion, and has been since antiquity, is just kind of how odd the whole thing of the Achaean wall feels. but there's a lot of, I mean, fascinating mythological and narrative stuff behind it, and it involves a lot of comparative mythology discussions, literary discussions. Like, I within the span of a couple days, I read several papers just of them looking at specific aspects of the Achaean wall. Whether literally one paper arguing how many gates did it have, one talking about myth of destruction, and like we're talking like 20 something page papers, each of them. So, yeah, Poseidon is insulted at this wall that one, they built it and they didn't give proper offerings to the gods while building such a impressive structure as a whole goddamn wall and a ditch with gates and towers and all this shit. And it's like, are people just going to forget about the wall at Troy? Hello, this thing that we built that's like a whole big fucking deal? What the fuck? So yeah, that's pretty much what Poseidon is bitching about. So they conferred together, building their resolve. The sun went down. The Argives' work was finished. They slew oxen beside the tents and took their meal. And the ships pulled in from Lemnos, bringing wine, a big convoy sent across by Eunaeus, Jason's son, whom Hypsipyle bore the seasoned lord of armies, an outright gift to Atrides, Agamemnon, and Menelaus. Eunaeus gave a shipment of wine, 1,000 measures full. From the rest, Achaean soldiers brought their rations, some with bronze and some with gleaming iron, some with hides, some with whole live cattle, some with slaves, and they had a handsome feast. Then all that night the long-haired Achaeans feasted, as Trojans and Trojan allies took their meal in Troy. Yes, but all night long the master strategist Zeus plotted fresh disaster for both opposing armies, his thunder striking terror, and blanching panic swept across the ranks. They flung wine from their cups and wet the earth, and no fighter would dare drink until he'd poured an offering out to the overwhelming son of Cronus. Then down they lay at last, and took the gift of sleep. Master strategist Zeus. Remember, this is all following the will of Zeus. So say the will of Zeus is moving toward its end, whatever that will may be. This entire little snippet of the war is almost like a balancing act by Zeus, because he has to allow the Trojans a kind of victory. He needs the Greeks to suffer because Thetis pulled her divine IOU, right? But he can't do it so badly that ultimately the Greeks do not ultimately win the war. So, and additionally, I mean, again, that's in the context of the Iliad. Outside the context of the Iliad, this could be tied to the other sources, such as, we talked about the Kypria. There's the Megalaia, which is a Hesiodic like fragment that states that the entire Trojan War itself was some sort of deliberate decision by Zeus, again, to like ease overpopulation or something like that. So he's doing he's a master strategist because he's got to fulfill different things all at once, but only sort of just so. And also account for the fact that humans are weird and will do things that like you don't expect, or stuff will go the way you didn't intend. So there you go. But that is, okay, Peg, I'm going to lean back a bit. That is book 7, Ajax versus Hector. It was a very quick fight. It was a good fight. I think it was a good fight. Peg, are you going to mind? Your butt is kind of there. It's kind of a slight problem for me. She does not care. It was a quick but a good fight. And we got to see, basically Ajax be a boss. Hector was a bit of a boss. Humans gonna human in ways that even the catch. Yeah, well, the humans will do things where they're like, wait, we did not expect that to happen. How did that happen? Yeah, no, Hector underestimated just how fucking insane Ajax was. I'm telling you, Ajax is such a badass. It's insane how much of a badass he really is. Like, it's amazing, quite frankly. I love it. It's why I love telling, as I say, his nickname would be Fridge. He comes in like a whole ass fridge. They call him a brick house. And he gives Hector a good beating. He gives him a good beating. But also, once again, we have the image of once they're out of weapons to use, they just start grabbing boulders and rocks and chucking them at each other. And again, the warfare is so nasty. I mean, it is so brutal and violent and sort of visceral and like almost primal and feral in the way that it happens. Like there's nothing pretty about the way that these people are fighting. Yeah, Hector throws a spear, makes most of the shield disappear. Then he throws a rock and really makes the shield disappear. I mean, he throws that boulder, basically, and completely destroys the shield. Yeah, Greater Ajax is essentially their version of a tank. He functions like a tank, which is ironic, sort of what the chariots we think were meant to sort of function as, but, you know, in the Iliad, they're taxi cabs. So... And that's the thing, is almost none of the fights that we see are like disciplined fights. I mean, the closest you got to what we might call a disciplined fight was the duel between Paris and Menelaus. That's as close as we got to a proper like disciplined fight, which obviously ended real quickly, and because Aphrodite intervened. But most of the fighting we see between, even when we do these little zoom ins to these sort of duels that happen, there's nothing pretty about them. It's not like, oh, these are the rules of war, and this is how we do it. It's just, we're all trying to kill each other by, like, basically whatever means we have at our disposal. For how petty Poseidon is, the Trojan War is just one slap after another. First, the Trojans don't pay him, the Greeks make a wall to rivals' work, then they smear his reputation with the horse. They don't smear his reputation with the horse. Madi-san, where did you get the idea that they smear his reputation with the horse? I mean, and the thing with the Trojans not paying for the wall, that's all pre the Trojan War. That's the generation, 2 generations really prior, almost. Depending on the lifespans of these heroes, which, mind you, it does seem the Greek heroes had these kind of longer than usual lifespans, and that includes Nestor living an obscene lifespan. And we're gonna talk about that in book 12, about how there's language that suggests again that these heroes are like almost their own race. The Trojan horse is not for Poseidon. It's for Athena, number one. And it's not an insult to Poseidon at all. It's not even an insult to Athena in the way that it's used. No, not at all. Not in the slightest. By Daniela. But, I mean, Poseidon, I guess, does come off. I mean, frankly, all the gods come off as petty. Yeah. Nestor talking about when he was young, and I jokingly think, oh, you mean at the beginning of time when the world began? Well, and that's, again, when you talk about the mythological timeline, which is a fucking mess, don't try to make sense of it, because even the Greeks didn't make sense of it and would try to put forward their own ideas, because then you also have, it's like, so where do these guys fit with relation to the myth of Deucalion and the flood, the sort of really well-known big deluge myth of Greece is, pan-Hellenic sort of thought and myth is that of Deucalion. And then he makes a whole new, who's a son of Prometheus, he makes a whole new race of man out of stone. Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey shit. But yes, Nestor is quite old. When did the rules of war as we think of them develop? Because the ancient world wasn't on the same playbook as we are. Yeah, no, there are no war crimes, basically. There's no Geneva Conventions. The idea of rules of war, they're really... I say the rules of war, so I'm assuming you mean etiquette like... Actually, I will then ask, Harold, further define what you mean by rules of war. Like, what do you mean specifically by rules of war? Because then I can probably better answer your question, because it's a big question. There weren't even guidelines. It's sort of like, again, we know the one big moral constant of Odyssey, we'll say, is Xenia. But the idea of, like, rules of war, it's not really like there's even rules or guidelines. It's like, here's the kit and caboodle we have, and here's how we fight. Now, again, Homer is not reflecting actual combat, but even then, it's not like they all agreed, we do this, this, and this. I mean, even it would seem like we know they stripped the dead. And that's not even a universal agreement, right? Like, that's not the universal agreement. They have to make the agreement beforehand. Our codified assignment, what is acceptable to do under arms of Geneva Convention? Oh, I mean, you want to talk Geneva Conventions and chivalry? You're talking several thousands of years after this. Well, hundreds, like 8,000 plus years after this. You're talking like well after the fall of Rome. Like that's post Rome. You would then be looking at like the medieval. I don't even know where in the medieval era. You'd have to look. I will say I don't know enough. Well, yeah. Well, and some of the stuff like Geneva Conventions and stuff like that, those come pre World War One as well. Like you're going into more medieval, Renaissance, modern era. Like we are well past Rome at that point. I would say I'm not a master in terms of like history of warfare and in terms of history of like these sort of war rules, as you would say, the rules of war. But well after this, and even and the idea of international law is. And international law, the way we say it, is not the same as having sort of rules of war, because you can have sort of understood behavior. But it may not be codified in a law book. But again, even stuff like Geneva Conventions, if we call that like a codified law book or something like that, that's coming, I think, in like the 1800s. And there's several of them, so, but very well into the future from here. It does seem everyone agrees Achilles goes too far with Hector. Yes, he does, for many, many, many reasons. And it's not even just that he takes Hector's body, he desecrates it. Oh, we are well over 1,000, like, if we say that the Trojan War is 1250-ish BCE, yeah, like several thousand years out, basically. Yeah. So yeah, Achilles goes too far with Hector for many, many reasons. It's not that he strips the body or anything like that. Like, that's fine. Again, they're all stealing shit from each other. But like, they fight over the bodies of the dead to steal shit and whatever. Like, this is normal. We know this. It's that it's what he does with the body. It's like after he's already stripped it, which is like, fine, strip it. Who cares? And even taking the body almost to hold it ransom is kind of one thing, but stripping it naked, lashing it to the back of his chariot, dragging it across the plain to destroy the body in that way is like, buddy, what the fuck? And like, again, even the Greeks would be metaphorically clutching their pearls, like, what the fuck? And even his behavior before he duels Hector, because is a form, we won't use ours if you won't use yours. So we saw that Hector gave Ajax this whole, look, hey, let's set the terms. Like, we are dueling to the death. We both understand this. Whoever dies, their body can be stripped of all their stuff. Understood. But you leave the body, let their friends take it to give a burial, so like you don't fuck with it. That's fine. He's going to make that same proposal to Achilles. And Achilles is flat out going to say, fuck you, basically. No. He goes, I would rather eat out your heart. Which is like, no, fuck you. I'm going to kill you. And then I'm going to eat your heart basically in front of your family. I'm going to commit cannibalism. Like, one of the worst things a Greek could do. Like, Achilles is so far beyond the realm of humanity in that moment that it's like, oh, fuck. Oh, shit. And it speaks on how Achilles has entered in his Aristeia to a point where it's like, buddy, you are chasing Kleos in such an excess, you have left the realm of humanity. And it's ultimately what's going to get you killed. It's part of what he knows. Killing Hector and what's happening here, it's like his death is right around the corner, basically. So, yeah. Everybody agrees that what he did to Hector's body is horrific and unfucking called for. And it's nobody, and then that's where again I say Achilles is not a likable character in the Iliad. He may be the primary hero, but that doesn't mean you have to like him. And I would argue the Iliad doesn't want you to like him. You only get a couple glimpses where Achilles behaves well. For most of it, he behaves really fucking poorly. And it makes it so funny to me that people just like go on about it. He's like, oh, he's so good. And I'm like, he's fucking garbage in the Iliad. He's an awful existence. And again, I think the Iliad is trying to make that point that he's kind of a shit person. He's not likable. Like it's like the point. And ironically, you know, this sort of ennobling of Achilles and making him seem even more tragic. I mean, there is tragedy in what happens, absolutely. Rome comes in, fucking Statius, who just like so much of what people think they know about Achilles. I'm like, it comes from Rome, it comes from Statius, who's seemingly pulling shit out of thin air, in several cases, because we just have no written or even like visual Greek mythic tradition for a lot of what happens in the unfinished Achilliad prior to the Achilliad. Like it all comes from Rome. So much of it comes from Rome, and a lot of that is you have to build Achilles as this seeming incredible, like slightly more noble but impressive sort of hero, because then Paris with Apollo are going to take him down for his act of impiety. Because Rome was all about being hella fucking pious. It's why Aeneas is so boring. And that just comes to different cultures with their different attitudes towards their heroes, right? And what they view as heroic and how they view them. And yeah, it's a whole big, too big a conversation that pulls from many different sort of like academic trains and scholarly trains. Yeah, protagonist. Oh yeah, no, protagonist does not mean hero the way we think of the hero in literature. Yeah, Rome, let my Greek men be, let the men be messy. Look, I like my Greek heroes in the form of a hear me out, in that you will tell me all the horrendous shit they do, how awful they are, and I'll go, but hear me out. Here's like one positive. 99% of him is horrid, but there's like a 1% that I'm about. So hear me out. I like my messy Greek men with their messy Greek feelings. And there is, again, an inherent violence to a lot of these men, because a lot of them are, you know, we're dealing with hubris, and there's an inherent violence to that word hubris. And it's a very violent world. So they are reasonably despicable human beings. And I love that. I love that they're despicable and awful and terrible. They're interesting. Because even Hector, noble Hector, yeah, that man is all about his glory. He's all about chasing that glory. He's as self-centered as these Greek heroes. And he is ultimately chasing Kleos to excess. It's what gets him killed. I'm like, yeah. He's still interesting, though. It's like, look at all these fuckers. They're such a mess. I love them. And I think that, not to say that all humanity is like terrible or something, and that like you can't have a person who's inherently good and have them like that makes them boring. It's like, no, that's not true. Not in the slightest. But something about, and again, the great irony being when we have our whole talk about Hesiod and this argument and this belief that this race of heroes is a completely separate race, basically, from humanity as we know it now. Like, it's almost more honest that they are such fucking walking disasters. If I didn't promise our mother on her deathbed I wouldn't kill you, I would kill you. Which, oh yeah, Kevin Spacey. Yike. It's unfortunate he's such a good actor. Hero means paragon. Paragon of physical prowess and ability, specifically, really. You do things and you accomplish feats that are seemingly superhuman. Now, you then get into, again, the Hesiodic argument. And it's not just Hesiod who says this. There's a bunch of other philosophers and stuff who will say this. that these are actually a completely separate race of humans. That the whole Age of Heroes, this almost like blip at the end of the, again, often placed between the Age of Bronze and the Age of Iron. There's a whole lot of, like, this involves, you would have to do so much reading of like how the Greeks were trying to make sense of their own timeline, which does not conform to the actual, to an actual historical timeline, mind you. That this was a race of almost like different humans, and that ultimately they had to die out because they were too closely linked with the gods, actually. Because most of them are all, again, the Greek hero, a prerequisite. You need to have a god in your bloodline somewhere, right? Yeah, Greek hero did something really cool. Doesn't mean you are a good person while doing it. See Jason and Medea, see Theseus after his big moment. See almost every Greek hero. At some point, they will do something where you're like, should you have done that? I mean, it's really cool and all, but should you have done it that way? Well, yeah, well, Dante, yeah, he Italian. The part of that is he's Italian. Is, you know, and the Italians come from the Romans, and the Romans come from the Trojans, and the Trojans really fucking hate the Greeks. Well, specifically if you're Virgil. Different race, like how Aragorn is Dunedain, or like different. Okay, I don't. Okay, I'll be real, Summers. I do not know enough about Tolkien to really adequately answer that. Like I'm not that deep in the Tolkien lore. If somebody wants to explain to me, like I don't understand where, like how is do you believe it is the Dunedain, or is it the Dunedain? I think it's the Dunedain. That's more Arizorte. Game Wizard. When we say different race, like how Aragorn is Dunedain versus the other of the race of men, with all of your character limits, which I understand you have, please explain. I'm really not that deep in Tolkien lore. I've read Tolkien. I am not super deep into the Middle Earth lore. But different race in that there is a human parent, but there's a god in there somewhere. And so it literally makes them kind of like a different race, to the point that they actually have to be like wiped out. And again, this comes to the argument of Troy as a destruction myth. If you've already done the flood myth of Deucalion, which is said to usually which has its own sort of amorphous, again, place in this non-existent timeline. That, you know what? Fuck it. Hold on. Oh, sorry. I have to get it because it's just out of reach. Previews basically for what we're going to get in book 12, since I have my notes on the myth of destruction. This comes down. Dunedain and Numenor, by extension, are humans who had a source with elves who chose to be normal, thus had blessings of a sort of divine origin, not a different race, but similar. Akin to, but you're closer. Yeah, that's close. Close in a way. It's because we're going to get a phrase in book 12 called Emiteon genos andron. Oh, I think it might be genon andron. Which evokes a hesiotic description of the heroes as a completely separate race. Genos, which I think, I know there's a character limit. If you think of that word, it's a social, it means, the genos, the plural being genne, in ancient Greece, it's a social kinship group or clan whose members claim descent from a common, real, or mythical ancestor. So like literally, so emiteon, genos andron, you have this word, emiteon, which comes from emiteos. There's technically like a hidden H in there, but emiteos. So this word, if you break it down, make sure I don't talk out my ass. Again, I'm looking up all of these ancient Greek words. Comes from two words. It's a compound of the word emi, or hemi, which means half, and theos, which means God. So part God. So these men get described as emitheion genos andron, half god men race, half god race man, basically, if you say, or part god race man. These heroes, I call them the heroic race. They are like a separate race because they are so closely linked with the divine and in their bloodlines. Because as it says in Homer, the continuity of history from the heroes to the poets' contemporaries, so to the heroic age, it's complete. Even though, I mean, the whole genre of an epic poem doesn't call for everybody to like list their actual genealogy, right? To link the men of the present with those of the past. But the Trojan War becomes a kind of clear break, almost in like a timeline in a way, in between the races, that the Trojan War becomes a catastrophe which serves as a boundary between the heroes and these later weaker generations. I mean, we are describing these heroes picking up like boulders that weigh a ton with like one hand and chucking them at each other. These guys are just built different, to the point that there is, again, that phrase, emitheion genos andron, which is coming in book 12, which is why I said, I'm like, we're going to talk about it in book 12, is seeming to hint at this idea that comes from kind of Hesiod, at least in terms of the earliest source, that this is a almost essentially different race of humans. Because at one point Hesiod, in his work called the Erga, which I think is the Works of Days, goes on this sequence of like history in terms of these ages of metal. And so he says he inserts the heroes, this heroic race, this age of them, into a sequence of metals between bronze and iron. So if you have age of bronze, then all of a sudden, which declines and ends, but then all of a sudden age of heroes, sort of in between bronze and iron. Oh, we briefly reverse the decline, but then nope, Trojan War happens. End. And again, that word emitheion, emitheioi, plural, is used by Hesiod. So the hero race, as I call them, the heroes that we look at of the Greek mythology, right? If you look at the non-existent wibbly-wobbly timeline. So you have an extrapolation of, it's like previous race of bronze, where you've got these bronze, which are so characteristic of these epic warriors, that like they are just post-bronze, but we're not yet iron because we're not bringing in iron weapons. Like that's sort of where Hesiod sort of puts them in this made-up timeline of these ages of metal. And so, as this paper says, it goes, for the sake of this scheme, the idea of Troy as a destruction myth, in which the Dike, or the Daiki of the heroes, which is the justice, the human justice of the heroes, if we say moral order, fair judgment. Just making sure I was like, human justice, right? Yes. The Daiki, this almost morality of the heroes, is opposed with the hubris of the bronze men. And because the heroes have a traditional kind of esteemed place in history, they're like kept separate from the bronze men. Like, oh, you're not the same. You guys have an almost greater morality. It also does mean they go off the deep end in a more extreme way. Their end, however, as we would say, is not unlike that of their predecessors, because this age of bronze that Hesiod talks about, it said the bronze men, we'll call them, perished at their own hands, slaying each other. And this is similar then to this hero race, because they all die in that same way at Troy. They all fucking kill each other. And also, linking back to also the 7 against Thebes. What else do we have here? Yeah, here we go. The other Hesiodic account of the Trojan War, despite its many difficulties, does make the destruction of the heroic race a deliberate action on the part of Zeus. This work, which I mentioned, it's a fragment, the Ehoi, which is attributed to Hesiod, but not everybody agrees on that, and it is only in fragments, so we've got bits and pieces of it. It has this sort of catalog of the suitors of Helen. We know are all these heroes. I mean, most of these guys are here fighting because they all went to pursue Helen. They all signed the Pact of Tyndareus. And that catalog of Helen's suitors leads directly to a description of the beginning of the Trojan War, like what caused it, we'll say. And in that description, from again this fragment called the Ehoi, which is how you spell that. It's stated that Zeus began the Trojan War, let this war happen, with the intention of eliminating the hero race from mortal life and enforcing a stronger separation between the gods and man. So again, these heroes are almost like a different race in that, as much as I don't like the term demigod because of the way people use it in modern context, that word emiteon, half god, it's linking that they are almost like this bridge in between humanity and the gods, but they are still mortal like humans, and they are not still on the level of gods, but it is just they are allowed these moments of aristeia, of superhuman feats, and they are related to gods. Every single one of these heroes has a god somewhere in their bloodline, usually not that far off. That it's become a problem. It's becoming a bit much. So, and the implication is that once this heroic race has been removed, like we've let them destroy each other, no more of them are going to come. Like, as we would say, no more are engendered. Like, that's it. We're done. So, as we would say, war is thus the natural conclusion of the poem, whose main subject has been this work, the Ehoi. War is the natural conclusion of that poem, whose main subject has been the unions of mortal women with divinities, which ends up leading to all these emiteoi, as we call them. And so the poem attributes the engendering of the heroes to a habitual mingling of mankind and gods. Basically, when you all start screwing each other and pop out these, somebody, I've got, a god is my daddy or my mommy, but the other parent's immortal, it's a problem. So the Trojan War becomes this event of like cosmic proportions. That poem also is like that involves it begins with a sort of disturbance in nature, and that's where, again, we're going to talk really about this in book 12 because because of that particular set of words, that theon genos andron, because that phrase used by Homer, it's the only appearance of that phrase is in that moment of the Iliad, which is that we then talk about the destruction of the Achaean wall and all of that. You go, Homer, you being sly. Homer is being sly because he does not have the ability to go over the whole idea of Troy as a destruction myth when he's so laser focused on like a very small part of the war and what he's doing with the Iliad. Again, we're the poet. I just say Homer and he. These other themes are kind of naturally suppressed because it would distract. It doesn't fit what we're doing here, but he kind of uses them to his advantage and like slyly brings them in. And the Achaean wall is a big part of that. And you sort of have to start talking about it here in book 7 when they first build the wall. But then when we start talking about the way the wall is destroyed, that all comes to fruition. A lot of that is like very, very lots of extra reading you have to do to see all of that. But yes, that is that is part of that idea of the heroes being almost like their own race. Like they're mankind, but they've also got a little bit of the divine sauce in there, and that's causing problems. It's why they do, again, these sort of seemingly superhuman feats. I do think it's also why then often they are affected by hubris, because they're like, I'm just that much better than you. And why they then tend to crash and burn in very dramatic ways. Yay. Good for them, I guess. But yeah, no, it's messy. I try my best. I know that was a lot of reading and a lot of quoting from an academic paper that's much longer. It's like an 18-page paper, and which does not like to translate its Greek at all, which drove me nuts. It's taken me ages to read it. I like to drop little hints of stuff like this. We get into our little bit of academic sauce. I try not to go too far because I understand it can deeply confuse and lose everyone. But yeah. God, seeing their descendants fucking up a lot, putting a pause on more, at least the PR on them gets worse. Yeah, but that's why again the idea of Troy as a destruction myth eliminates this race of heroes. So I say it's like after the war at Troy, like you have nothing left really. There's no more myth. Like that's kind of it. It all just sort of ends because that's the idea really at the end of the day. If you look at Troy as a destruction myth, the idea is like cut it off, end it. And there was a phrase going back to this paper. I still haven't even like finished taking all my notes on this paper. Still like a page and a half more to take notes on. Where was there? It was a great phrase. Here, we'll do more of this bit with the Achaean wall since I mentioned Babel. It says Poseidon fears for his Kleos, complaining that the Achaean wall will be famed beyond his Trojan wall. Which I then mentioned, I'm like, think of the flood myth from the Bible, the biblical flood. The biblical flood, the heroes before the deluge, before the biblical flood, are the famous men. And the theme of fame recurs shortly after the flood in connection with a building which, like the Achaean wall, arouses divine anger, aka the Tower of Babel. Babel's builders, like the Achaeans, seek to make a name for themselves and to not be kind of scattered. And you say if a distant echo of kind of this destruction kind of myth and the building of something to evoke the ire of a god is at work in the Iliad, it might help explain why the flood theme is transferred to a wall. Because again, how the Achaean wall is ultimately destroyed involves like 7 to like 8 rivers and like 9 days of rain and all of it just kind of like sweeping the wall away. Why it's transferred to a wall and why the context emphasizes dispersal as much as destruction. Again, the scattering of stuff. Where is that bit about the military? Maybe it's back here. Sorry, many notes, many a note. I can't even remember what I was going to talk about anymore. Anyway. Yeah, Book of Genesis. I mean, that's also where the stuff with Babel, I think, comes from Genesis and all that as well. But yeah, that's where you see some of the intrusion of like Near Eastern myth. Because again, the late Bronze Age and the Mediterranean, all of them in the Mediterranean, they were all communicating with each other. We have evidence of that. And then it all just kind of like stops for the dark, especially for Greece for the Dark Age. Hermes, your great grandson is fucking up again. Hermes, I don't know him. Who? What? But yeah, it's a lot of comparative myth. Even just within Greek mythology, you do comparative myth with itself. Talking about like why did the Trojan War happen? And be like, well, depends which source you read. Was it just Greece that had this Dark Age at the end of the Bronze Age? It was pretty widespread. Many civilizations were affected by this kind of collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations. Greece, I would say, probably had it some of the worst. But like Egypt did reasonably okay. The Phoenicians, which essentially already existed, they actually kind of thrived in what we call the Greek Dark Age. I should say it gets called the Greek Dark Age usually because they basically hit hard reset on so much of their culture. It's wild. Deucalions. Yeah, we mentioned Deucalion earlier. And again, we'll talk about Deucalion more when we hit book 12. And we have the catalog of the rivers and everything else, which is a short catalog. It's only like 8 rivers. But we'll say the collapse of late Bronze Age civilization affected numerous ones. And I would say if you want to know more, you can look up some if you look up just stuff with Eric Klein on YouTube, he's given like interviews and stuff on podcasts where he talks about like the collapse of the late Bronze Age and all of that. And his stuff, he's really easy to listen to. He explains, and yeah, I've recommended 1177 BC. And then if you want, you can read the follow-up book, which is after 1177 BC. But if you do better, just like with shorter snippets and slightly more focused conversation, find clips of him on like various podcasts and stuff on YouTube, and he's very interesting to listen to. Like he's you want to hear what he has to say, and he talks in such a way that makes it still really digestible. I mean, it was from him that I learned Armageddon is an actual fucking place. Yeah, he does narrate his own audiobook, and he's very good. Well, China and India were not really in as much communication with the think of the Bronze Age Mediterranean like its own little kind of mini nursery. There was some trade, but not nearly as much. Yeah, no, Armageddon is an actual place. Do you know how much that blew my mind? Do you know how dumb I felt? You can look up a video, if you just type in like Eric Klein Armageddon in like YouTube, and you'll have videos where he's dug at the site. I think it's called Megiddo. Yeah, Tall Megiddo. Yeah, he's dug at Megiddo like numerous times, in fact, I believe. And so he talks about that, and I was just like, what? I was like, what in the hell? What in the hell? It was very cool. Yeah, he's done numerous, I believe, archaeological excavations and trips to Megiddo. Super interesting. And he explained like how you get from Tall Megiddo to Armageddon. Like it was essentially a part of what was ultimately a copying error by a monk. And that then copy error kept getting copied, and like how words like it's so cool. Yeah, exactly. No, Falco knows. But yeah, no, if you just type in Eric Klein Armageddon into YouTube, you'll find again, interviews he's done, like talking about it. Very interesting stuff. Again, he's super I would say if you want to learn about like late Bronze Age, kind of collapse of the Bronze Age and stuff like that, and the Bronze Age Mediterranean, because he just kind of covers all of it in a way. Super interesting. Like so interesting, and he does have a way of explaining that is really easy to follow. He just has a good way in which he teaches and talks about these subjects. And I mean, and also because he's super passionate about it, obviously. So that makes it even better. Like, he cares and he loves it, and he wants to know all about it, and he's like very happy and like willing to explain whatever. Also, he is known for having like incredibly fabulous ties, as I learned. Like he just has these kind of amazing like fun ties that he'll wear in interviews, which I think is kind of great. Like complete non sequitur. I'm like, yeah, damn right, he's got cool ties. Hell yeah, that's awesome. Oh, excuse you. Oh, are you dreaming? She's dreaming and doing like big huffs in her dream. But yeah, fun facts about that. And then you just think of the timeline and remember that if we say the war at Troy is happening around like 1250 BCE, Ramesses II is ruling Egypt. That's what's happening in Egypt during the mythological Trojan War. Ozymandias, King of Kings. That's the Greek name for Ramesses II, is Ozymandias. Hence Percy Shelley's famous poem, which was when they brought in that massive statue called the Young Memnon, I believe, over to Britain in the British Museum. I think if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's definitely still there. That's where he then got the idea of writing the Ozymandias poem. Oh my God, yo, Ramesses II's son was basically the first Egyptologist. And okay, get ready for this. This is funny. And this is where I say I've actually, you know what? Hold, I'm gonna link some funny, who's the scholar? There's a really fun, what's his name? Yes. Uh, what is this guy's name? There's a really psychologist or historian. His name is Tristan Hughes. Um, if you look up this guy talking about anything Egypt, like he did a couple podcasts on the ancients, and they did covered Ramesses II. He's really fun, and he's also wildly entertaining when he explains all this. He notes that like because Ramesses II had like 100 children. That man kept busy because he lived to be like 90. His son was basically like the first Egyptologist because he thought it was wild. He went, you know, he pyramids. By that point, they've moved away from using pyramids in terms of burial structure. And that they're part of essentially, I think, the old kingdom, if I recall correctly. Because again, if we're in the late Bronze Age, that's the new kingdom. He goes back, he goes and he looks at him, and the wildest thing I can't remember what the name of Ramesses' son was, but he finds the wildest thing is that like nobody remembers, like the common person is not going to remember who built them. Because he's like, what the fuck do you mean? Because Ramesses II put his cartouche, like his name, basically, on fucking everything. He put his name everywhere. He was the master of marketing. He plastered it everywhere. So really, Ramesses the son, really you could like carves in there going like, you know, this is the pyramid of whoever had the pyramid, whoever the pyramid's for. I can't remember. He goes, and like Ramesses II son, whatever, and the one who like am reminding you that that's who did it. And it was just, like to him, it was almost wild. Like, what do you mean this guy didn't slap his name on it? You got to slap his name on it. They were their own first Egyptologists because it was so removed. I mean, there are 3,000 years of Egyptian history before you hit like Cleopatra. Right? Like, Cleopatra is closer to us in the timeline than she is to the builders of the pyramids. Yo, Ramesses II put his name on everything, and his kid was just like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's who this pyramid is for." And I, you know, Ramesses II's son, this person, whatever, cartouche, I'm the one who's, you know, letting you know. I'm the one who's saying this, letting you know. It was again, Ramesses, master of marketing, master of propaganda. Like, it's why he kind of gets called Ramesses the Great. You know, from what I understand, and I am not an Egyptologist. I mean, like any kid, I had a brief little. Everybody went through an Egypt phase as a kid. Like we all kind of went through an Egypt phase, and I do find ancient Egypt fascinating. Every now and again, there are very specific periods or pharaohs I'll like sort of hone in on. Like I find the Amarna period fascinating. Of course I do. Of course I find the Amarna period fascinating, which is pre-Ramses II. It's the ending of the 14th dynasty into the 15th, whatever the case. Like, where was I before this? No, yeah, I don't know enough about Egyptology or whatever to be concerned, but from what I understand, a lot of Egyptologists, from at least what interviews and stuff I've seen, most of them are not going to tell you that they think Ramses II was the best hero. He certainly frequently told you he was the best, but is he the one that they maybe consider the best? Like, it actually might have been some of these guys who like laid all the foundations and actually got, you know, the loosely we'll say empire kingdom in order, and Ramses had to take advantage of that. But yeah, no, it's wild shit. I can understand why each serves as. I understand why like we all go through an Egypt phase because it's like, dude, that's like 3,000 years of history. Before Rome is even an empire, like, and it's wild. They were also rich as hell. So many of the what get called the Amarna stuff talk about how like there's so much. I mean, and again, because Egypt goes around and conquers other very areas of North Africa, that there's so much gold in Egypt. They said they're like, gold is like water for you. Gold is nothing to you. Send us gold. I'm like, oh, you're suddenly getting flash forwards to the Spanish, Central and South America. Session with gold. It is. Oh yeah, and 90 back then was insane. Lived that. He lived so long. Oh sure, yeah, no, Cleopatra. I mean, again, that's the last gasps of the Roman Republic. It will eventually transfer into the empire under the princeps of Augustus, who never calls himself emperor, he calls himself princeps, which means essentially like first citizen, but he's not called imperator. Yukon Cornelius. I mean, he literally should have been hanging out in North Africa. Because I don't think it's necessarily Egypt specifically. I mean, modern day lines, I have no fucking idea about the geography. Don't ask. I don't know. I think it was like areas like, was it like Numidia and others where they have just like all these gold mines. Oh, Augustus was absolutely well, he learned from the best. He learned from watching what happened with his uncle, who had learned from seeing it with, you know, Sulla and Marius and like all of these guys. Like it did come down to a lot of like mastering of spin. And they were very good at it. Now, granted, you then get historians who might have things to say, but you know, then other emperors have to deal with that, like Tiberius. Yeah, that's a wild time. But that's Roman history. Granted, the Roman emperors are messy and fun to read about. They are. They're hot fucking messes. Are you good, Mama? Okay. But yeah, I realized I forgot to. Did anybody have any questions related to book 7 or ILIAD? Peg. And some, yeah, literally. Well, that's a wild time. Rome in a nutshell, yes. Mansa Musa from Mali, he wrecked economies by overspending when he was a tourist. Yep. Yep. Just would clear out all the inventory. So they're like, well, shit, what do we do? Oh, ILIAD bingo, all right. Yes. Yes, many of the Roman empires were walking human disasters. It's true. It's very true. Do you need to go out? Okay. He's just a little one. That's fine. That's fine. Everybody just likes a good game of bingo. On that note, Peg wants to go out. So I'm going to end it here. I apologize we started a little late. Technical difficulties. I will try to figure out what's going on with my fucking Streamlabs app and why it's misbehaving. But so it goes. Everybody have a good rest of your weekend. She'll see you, should be in 2 weeks. I think it's the weekend of like September 5th or something like that. It's around there. It's like the first weekend of September. But everybody have a good rest of your weekend.